All right, Judge. Welcome to I Never Knew TV. Right. Thanks for coming out here. First question I have: is it true that your grandfather worked with Alex Haley's grandfather?
Yeah, they were partners. Both of them were physicians. You saw Alex Haley's grandfather in Roots when supposedly the white ancestor was down there suffering from a heart attack, and the cousin didn't want him to touch his grandpa. They practiced in Jackson, Tennessee.
And also, did they both have to leave due to racial violence?
Well, they didn't leave Jackson, Tennessee, but my grandfather and an uncle murdered two deputy sheriffs for supposedly participating in the lynching of another uncle, and that was way back when. See, my grandfather was born in 1850. Well, that's 11 years before the Civil War started, so he made it to 100 plus. I was sitting on the side of his bed when he died. I was the last one to see him.
So after the murder of the deputy, how did it work out for him? He had to go on a run or something?
Well, he went on the run, put his age back 15 years, went to medical school, and he had been a teacher before that, so he and Haley's grandfather wound up together, and it was a kind of an interesting thing. They had a business partner that was one of the first black pharmacists in the state of Tennessee, so they went through him for all of their pharmaceuticals, and let's say one of the descendants from that interesting triangle wound up doing business with Alex Haley later on too, so it was interesting. Alex Haley was from right outside of Memphis.
So you come from a bloodline of strong militant people and intellectual people.
Well, yeah, and then as my Choctaw grandmother, she used to laugh at all the colored members of the family, and she said, "Oh, you colored folk, you get mad when white folk do stuff to you. We just took a scalp and nailed it to the lodge pole and smiled." She wound up benefiting the black cause. There is a historical black college and university, well, yes, in Jackson, Tennessee, known as Lane College. It was founded in 1862, and she wound up giving a third of the land to them that they're built on. And see, I had a great grandmother that was head librarian, a great aunt who was head librarian. My grandmother wound up being on faculty there, and my mother wound up being a librarian there before she went to, Lincoln University, and then Tuskegee Institute for a brief while before she and my father wound up going to California. And my old man was from Kansas City, and his father, my paternal grandfather, he was one of Bishop Mason's first disciples, and he took Kojic to Kansas City in 1896. So I'm 76 years old, so that drops all that timeline way back, and they bred late in the family.
I wanted to go back to this, the uncle. Like, did he ever tell you the story how he got away? That's pretty wild during that time to kill a white person and
It
escape
wasn't
from it.
that hard. They didn't have electronic communications. Nobody had photographs that they could post up on a post office. And if you got out of the immediate area, you were gone. And if you paid attention, you could hunt. You knew how to get through forest and swamp and back roads and travel after dark, navigate. And remember, this is in an era when a lot of people had combat experience from the Civil War, so it's not unusual. In fact, it's interesting, at one point when black folk were 1/3 of the country's population, and you had all that untamed territory from the Mississippi and all the way to the Pacific West, and a lot of Native Americans that could have been allied with, the country's history would have been a lot different if black folk had, shall we say, taken advantage of the opportunity. Everybody, by the way, in the family managed to escape slavery without Master Lincoln having to intervene.
Did you ever hear the stories in regards to the means they used to escape slavery?
Yeah, on my father's side, my great grandfather decapitated his slave master and cut the slave master's wife's hands off because she had touched him. He escaped to Canada, and he came back, and one of them was an Irishman. The other great-grandfather was a Choctaw. And then there was my great-grandfather on my mother's side, who was a Yoruba district sub-chieftain. He got kidnapped after the slave trade was over and brought over to the nascent new union. I think it was 1817, and he wound up having to be freed. So my grandfather on the mother's side was his first kid by his newly acquired, I guess you'd say, wife. He had gotten himself free, so there was a slave owner in the district that did not like freed colored. So he kept tormenting him, and that person went bankrupt. So my great-grandfather bought his favorite slave mistress and 5 children that she had had with the slave master. So I guess he owned slaves for a while, but he freed her, married her. After he married her, my grandfather was the first one of 6 more that followed. So we got around.
You got elected to 2 8-year terms as a criminal court judge in Tennessee, right?
That's right.
State recidivism rate for felons was 80%, and in your courtroom, you dropped it down to 18%. The question I have, can you explain for our viewers? Please explain what recidivism is before we get to the next part.
Recidivism is repeat. In other words, if you are a convicted felon in most places in the country, you'll be back. That's called recidivism. So the rate was 80% of the convicted felons would come back for another round after they got through with their first set of sentences.
How did the implementation of Judge Joe Brown's counseling sessions help to get those numbers
It wasn't
down?
just counseling sessions. I became grandfather, uncle, village chieftain, so to speak. And the first thing that you have to have if you want a prosperous community is law and order. I know that sounds an anathema because of the misuse of the term, but it is what it is. You get a group of people together, 4, 5, 6 people in there somewhere, they set up rules. You can look at it in John Wick. Rules are what separate us from the animals. There are consequences. And for some reason, there is a sense of lack of accountability and consequence that is developed, particularly in our community over the last 50-some years. In fact, across the whole country, which is a part of the thing I've seen develop since the late mid-60s, which is no rules, so certain people can not be held accountable for doing things that used to be against the rules. It's kind of a throw the baby out with the bathwater type situation because it just isn't working. We don't have consequence anymore. Everybody gets a damn participation ribbon. Everybody is supposed to be recognized. There's no shame that's supposed to be evoked, no guilt that's supposed to arise, and everybody just does what they want to do. But you see, when you have lack of accountability, you have lack of purpose, because if you have purpose, you have to have accountability to achieve the purpose. One of the things that I noticed that I addressed and dealt with when I reduced this recidivism rate was you had to go out in the community, you had to go deal with the fact that so many of these boys had not had fathers or uncles or grandfathers present in their lives, and you had to give them man training. Like, what is a man supposed to be about? We're supposed to be into the business of protecting womanhood and promoting further manhood to keep this cycle going for generation after generation. When you see, like, Judge, with no due respect, man, I ain't gonna make it to 24, man. What I got to worry about? Well, young brother, if you think you're a dead man already, you are a hero in the making. What do you mean? Because you work for me now. And the bottom line is, if you don't mind dying, I have a mission for you to die on if you want to take it that way. So even if you don't see daylight at the end of your tunnel, you can go through that tunnel and kill off the fire-breathing Gila monsters that are setting flames to that tunnel, so the smoke clears up and the people you're responsible for can get to the end of the tunnel. So you have a cause, you can be a brave man, and people will revere you instead of saying, glad that dude is gone. Now, that brings us to the other thing that is so rampant in our community. They shot him. I mean, they had no reason to do that. And then for somebody that's saying that, if you actually check, there's 15, 16, 17 saying, glad they killed the fool. He wasn't doing anything but making life miserable. I have had juries come back during the liberation and say, while the press is out there, this guy needs to get the death penalty, blah, 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 and the jury has a question. Mr. Jackson, you're the foreman for the grand jury, for the jury, is that correct, sir? Yes, Your Honor, it is. And you have, sir, reduced your question to writing? We have, sir. Would you please pass that to one of my bailiffs, Mr. Williams? Would you get that, please, and pass it to the court? I'm looking at it, and I polled the jury. Is this your question, Miss Thompson, Miss Osgood, Mr. Jackson, is this yours? Miss Swartz, is this yours? Mrs., let's see, your name, Wilberforce. Yes, is this yours? Okay. The court will now publish the question. Your Honor, if we feel that the victim deserved killing, do we have to convict the defendant? Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, you will retire to the jury room, reread your instructions that are contained in file jackets, so and so and so and so, and return such verdict as truth dictates and justice requires, and such as you are able to return without violence to your individual consciences. Please continue your deliberations. Thank you very much. You know, this was a reality. See, we get a lot of hype delivered to us, television in terms of drama, really sadly construed news, and a lot of stuff that is propaganda. We have acceptance as the regular thing, what 30 years ago used to be looked down on as tabloid journalism, National Enquirer, Globe, and Star. We get fixated on gossip, which used to be on the last column, last page of the last section of a newspaper. Yes, on the front. I can remember when I was still a criminal defense lawyer, I used to have laminated 2 pages from National Enquirer. One of them had a child, an infant, with an obviously airbrushed pig snout on, and it said, half boy, half pig, born in barnyard, adopted by loving parents. Doesn't happen, biologically impossible. But then a year and 4 months later, the next headline says, 5-year-old half boy, half pig, adopted by loving parents, now succeeding in school. And they got a kid sitting on daddy's knee with an airbrushed pig snout on. So obviously 5 years doesn't pass in 1 year and 4 months to begin with. It is all unreal. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, when I'm questioning you here on this Void Hour, I want you to take into consideration such things as this. Anybody remember this headline? And it all started laughing, you know, and objection, overruled. Counsel is simply establishing familiarity with the jury. So these were realities that used to exist, and now they have been told or practiced so long they look normal. And that's part of this whole process that we get victimized by. You tell a lie long enough and loud enough, and you can get anybody, including the liar, to believe it. That's Adolf Hitler, Joseph Goebbels, the Nazi minister of propaganda. And Hitler and Joseph they modeled their propaganda on America's Hollywood. They said that was the most profound propaganda engine that the world had ever created, and they looked to it for inspiration and methodology. And right here at home, that has been put into play, used and abused for the last half century.
I have a question since you brought up Hollywood. What is Hollywood's obsession with producing movies and funding movies where the storyline focuses on the time period when black people were enslaved?
Because they want black people to be conditioned to emotionalism. See, 55 years ago, when I was active in student and community affairs, myself, along with other people, we used to travel around the country to various college and university campuses, and we heard this group of people that was dedicating themselves to a lifetime of infiltrating and taking over the entertainment industry, the news industry, and politics so they could get their way of life imposed. Essentially, let's just put them as man haters. There were those who hated that they weren't men. There are those who hated men. There were those who hated they weren't strong men. There were those who hated that they weren't normal men. And there were those who hated that men supposedly caused war. So you had all of these people who did not match up to what would be termed the masculine standard, or who felt they were victimized by that. So they swore they were going to get rid of this. I can remember the first time I heard it, which was actually April 1967, people talking about masculinity is toxic and we're going to have to get rid of it for the salvation of humankind before we all kill each other off and nuke the world and all this kind of nonsense. So it went on from there. And I have seen this process of glorification of dysfunction so long that it has become normal. Now, I studied propaganda, and one of the targets of propaganda is to get your object to start thinking in terms of the propaganda that you're putting out. And compared to 50-some years ago and what I hear now, the process has been very successful because people express themselves and use the terms of the propaganda that has been directed against them. See, when you have the masculine component, it's about order, rationality, reason, logic, skepticism. It's about being rigorous in analyzing things. It's about a sense, an innate, instinctive sense that the thing between being a nice, tasty dish for another large predator on this planet and ruling the planet is putting your head into what you're doing, where you look carefully at the sign that you're seeing on the ground and around in the trees and what you're observing to keep from getting eaten, to find something to eat, and to keep your people from being lunch, breakfast, midnight snack to something large with a large appetite. Now everything on the planet is at our mercy, and what is it? Save the elephants, save the whales, save the tigers, send $19 a month to World Wildlife Fund, send $19 a month to ASPCA so poor Oscar won't be chained in the cold backyard and not no love. Send $19 a month to save a Negro because they're being so badly mistreated. You know, it's kind of getting weird when you look at it and say, man, I never thought it. I was hoping it wouldn't get this far, but I kind of knew it was going to, because we bought into it. It's like preachers now. They don't preach about sin. They talk about belief. You used to hear the perils of doing wrong and how you'd go to hell, and now you hear it's all right to be a pimp, hoe, drug dealer, murderer, thief, robber, rapist, burglar, it doesn't make any difference as long as you believe you're okay. So nobody preaches about the consequence of wrongdoing. You don't see somebody producing a dramatic work where somebody suffers because they did wrong, or doing right but having to suffer as a matter of principle, a tragedy. You hear all of this glorification of the wrong thing. Now, as far as black folk are concerned in the Hollywood industry, it started off in the late 1960s. Color television was beginning to work. First, they had these round screen things that weren't crap, and then they started getting square. They started working. And Hollywood at that time, every Sunday and every Thursday would come up with 2 new movies, 3 cartoons, and some little special reels at every theater in the country. No matter how well it was selling, it would change every Thursday and Sunday. And the movie industries were going broke trying to make that production schedule. So they got the idea, the folk that decided they were going to change the paradigm socially of taking over Hollywood, and what they came up with is, instead of doing 2 movies every Thursday and Sunday, we do just one and play it as long as people will come to see it. Also, instead of you walking in the middle of a movie, staying through what was showing, seeing the next one, and then sitting through what you missed to staying all night for 50 cents as an adult, let's charge $1.50, which we thought was outrageous, for one movie, and you had to go in there on time and leave when it was over. So what are we going to do, they said, about bringing in cash flow? Well, let's go to a group of neglected viewers who are anxious to see themselves, black folk. Well, let's not get one of those Sidney Poitier Moody movies or such that we had where they were talking about principle. Let's go to the lowest common denominator. Let's talk about drug dealers, pimps, hoes, and all that other kind of stuff and get the most cash flow. So the first time we saw this was Fred the Hammer Williams in Black Caesar, where the hero was a contract killer and a drug kingpin, and he prospered, and he drove off in a limo smoking a big cigar as the sun rose after a shootout in a Long Beach warehouse with dead folk all over the place and no LAPD coming along. Everybody said, what is this? Wait a minute. We're talking about drug dealing being an anathema for the black community, and the Panther Party, Black Student Alliance, and all of these community organizations are trying to get drugs the hell out and resist the attempt to have an influx of heavy drug. What is this? And then 18 months later, they come up with Superfly. Rod O'Neal goes in there, and, you know, everybody had afros, beards, subdued, olive drab, tan, dark brown, or black dashikis, Levi's, boots.
The perm came back in bright colors.
Yeah, the perm comes back in, Superfly nonsense, pimp mobiles. Yeah, man, we're gonna have to move some of that coke, man. That's deep, man. And I can remember it came out in LA in 1971, but in 1972 I was doing an intern thing at a think tank in DC, Washington. And my roommate and I were driving along. We were on 14th Street where they still had a movie house black folk went to. So we drove around this long block, and they had black folk in line coming out of the show where they'd bought a ticket, around to the far end of the short end of the block, down the long side of the block, around the short end, back up the long side, and back to the theater waiting to get in to see this poison. And everybody was talking about how deep it is. And we were saying, man, wow. And then we just happened to go look up through contacts we had the profit margins on that movie, which were enormous. and they bailed a couple of collaborating Hollywood studios out. Well, the latest ones that's done that is the Black Panther series, 1 and 2. Walt Disney and ABC in 2011 got hit by a huge lawsuit verdict. If you remember the series So You Want to Be a Millionaire, well, ABC and Disney, as per Hollywood, ranked them out. They do that all the time.
Explain what you mean by rank them out.
In other words, violated the contract, didn't act in good faith, cheated, stole money, which I ran into repeatedly over and over with CBS and Viacom.
I want to get to you for later about
so staff and crew of So You Want to Be a Millionaire sued ABC and Disney. They won. They were asking for about $8.5 million, and CBS, ABC, and Disney resisted, and then they went through federal court, and finally they wound up with the Ninth Circuit. 3-member panel went with the original plaintiffs, and then ABC and Disney went further. So the whole Ninth Circuit, the 9-member full panel, heard it. And the decision, the opinion's interesting. It says, this industry singularly refuses to comply with the first rule of American contract law, that is, all parties must deal with each other in good faith, period. Perhaps we can fix this. So instead of giving the $8-some million, they awarded the plaintiff $580 million. So Hollywood very seldom has cash on hand. They do a lot of stuff on credit and reciprocity and cash flow, but no cash on hand. So between 2011 and when they brought out the Black Panther movie, they owed the plaintiffs about $1.5 billion, and the interest was mounting, so the courts gave them a deadline on paying down the interest by a certain amount. The plaintiffs could levy and execute and take any item of ABC property in the country and the rides at Disney World and Disneyland in Anaheim, and most of the revenue on the rides to the plaintiffs. So I heard them plotting this stuff back when, before I left. And they were saying, we got to do something to pay this off. Let's go to the black people again. What will we do? So they came up with the Black Panther movie, which became the all-time high-grossing superhero movie in history. And everybody claims to love it. But let's look at that movie. The last scene, what were the men and women of the tribe doing? They were trying to kill each other in mortal combat. They were using weapons and actually trying to snuff each other. That's the men and women of the tribe. That's poisonous. Killmonger, who was looked at as a villain in the movie and was portrayed as such, was making actual verbatim statements that came from Frederick Douglass, W.E.B. Du Bois, Marcus Garvey, Malcolm X, H. Rap Brown, from Stokely Carmichael, from Huey Newton, and they made those the utterance of a villain. He was trying to use this high technology to take over Africa, then take over the world and run it peacefully, and he knew how to deal with a revolution. Killmonger was the son of the uncle of the current Black Panther, and the uncle had been killed by his brother, who was the Black Panther, because he wanted revolution. He was on the West Coast in America training these black kids how to be about business when they killed him. So Killmonger goes to MIT, graduates at 19 at the top of his class as a physicist / rocket scientist. Then he joins the Navy SEALs and is so good at killing, he becomes known as Killmonger. He's devoted his study to revolution, and then they got some handkerchief-head Negro playing the Black Panther in tights, playing vigilante for some strange white folk. Now, Stan Lee, who came up with the Black Panther, in the comics actually had the Black Panther like Killmonger in the movie. He was a hero and a revolutionary who only became involved in that kind of business because there was somebody engaged in sex trafficking and heavy drug sales and distribution that was impacting Africa and black people. That was not what they did in the movie. He had his little bald head babe bodyguards that looked like hoes on his arm playing pimp. And I know I used to represent a bunch of pimps and hoes in Memphis 40-some years ago in Memphis. And they weren't his bodyguards, they were his keepers. His mother ran the country, his aunt ran the country. There wasn't a single man in charge except that guy with the lip disc playing preacher. The men all had secondary roles, and then this is supposed to be the most technologically advanced country in the world. Did you see a restaurant anywhere in that place and everybody is eating off of a charcoal fire like they're 500 years in the past? Did you see any men who could fly the virtual fighter plane? No, they had to get a white guy who was a retired CIA agent to do it. It was sickness. And people just ate it up and loved it and didn't even realize what they were looking at, because that has become part of our psyche, which is negativity and self-defeatism. In other words, propaganda has as its objective to get the target to start thinking in ways that secure his own demise.
What about these slavery movies though? Why do you think
The slavery movies are part of getting you conditioned to being emotional and get you to go, woe is me, we've been done so wrong. So when you start talking about
victim talk then?
Yeah.
Right.
So when you start talking about, oh, woe is me, I've been done wrong, they present it to you as an excuse rather than as a motivation to get angry enough to do something. Now, I stopped after I got past what Hollywood did as a for instance, and I'm going to get to that one. What you get is an excuse for not doing what you ought to do. I knew Japanese guys when I grew up on the West Coast, and see, some of them had kinfolk who were in Japan in World War II. And they were kamikazes, or they knew kamikazes. They were into that Bushido thing. They were into that bonsai charge. And in other words, they understood that you always had an option, that is to die by your own hand or by your action. And when I think about what was going on, when I think about my Native American side, which is grandmother saying, you colored get mad at what white folk do to you. We take scalps and nail them to the lodge pole and smile. I get to thinking about, they've done a damn fine job of what they're doing. And I go back to when I was an intern at this DC think tank in '72 here in D.C., or in D.C. and in Chicago. And I think about what I read when I studied what they call the slave pamphlets that are on microfilm, or were in the Library of Congress. And it was get the slave to think in terms of his enslavement. So his culture teaches him that those things that we need him to be, that we need him to think like, are appropriate. In other words, get him thinking like a slave. Make sure he thinks he's dependent. Make sure he thinks he has to ask. Make sure he thinks that he should be grateful. Those three things. And you see, now we don't think like we did back in the 60s, like, get the hell out of my way, I'll do it for my damn self. It's, when are you going to give it to us? And then you see that gets back into, do you really expect somebody that's been oppressing you for hundreds of years to give you something that you are supposed to be able to ensure that you get? You see, the institution of slavery is particularly bad in America because it's chattel slavery, and that chattel is French for cattle. In other words, you dehumanize the slave. Previously, anybody might be a slave if he was unfortunate enough to get captured in a war. But here, the slave becomes a domestic animal, sort of a super chimpanzee or gorilla that walks on two legs, but is no more human than those animals are. You see, we even glorify the process, the woman king. That's out of Dahomey. The whole damn business was about slave catching. As a matter of fact, my great-grandfather, through the writings of my grandfather, is revealed to me, was very disturbed about the Dahomean thing. He was out on a mission patrol and he got captured, which is how he got sent over here after the slave trade. There were no woman kings in Dahomey. What happened is they had three brothers, literally kin, who would jointly inherited the kingship in Dahomey. So they came up with a brilliant idea. They said, we're not going to let our nobility hold these government posts. We get commoners. And for every commoner that holds a government post, we're going to have a beloved female relative of his in the palace is a concubine to one of us. And if that guy gets out of hand, we kill the female relative. We also throw in a little thing by allowing the female relative to veto what her male relative, who holds the official position, is talking about doing. So they had basically a battalion of Amazons, and everything else was run by men. So the whole movie was a lie, but the point of the exercise is so sickening is they glorified this very sordid event in our history of so many black folk getting enslaved around the world. And one of the centers was Dahomey, where the Dutch, the French, and to an extent the English financed this slave catching for several centuries. It didn't stop until the early part of the 20th century, and they were trying to bootleg it then. So that's like, let's say, women feminists deciding they wanted to show these heroic operatives in World War II who were females, so they're Jewish, and they pick Gestapo agents, female, who might have had a remote Jewish connection to glorify because they caught so many Jews and helped send them to the extermination camps. See, that's what that movie does, and it's part of that process of glorifying dysfunction and getting the targets of your propaganda going rah, rah, rah to something that's designed to hurt them. You see, the bottom line is if you get the black folk jacked around, what's happened is that the young white boys who don't get an appropriate dose of masculinity are looking at black youth, male youth, as the epitome of masculinity and are modeling themselves on what these young black guys are doing. And if the black guys are oppressed, then the white guys trying to emulate them get oppressed. If you go to a joint, prison, you hear a lot of black music being played by the neo-Nazi type, the Aryan Nation type, by the Hispanic gangs, but yet they claim to hate black folk. You see, because that's divide and conquer, what that is, but they ideate on stuff black. Rap is stagnant. It hasn't changed for 45 years. Hip-hop is dead. It's kept alive because there's a whole huge money-paying market of young males all around the world who want something masculine, and they ideate on gangster hip-hop rap video where it looks like men are in charge of the women because they don't see anything that promotes masculinity. So why change what works? And plus, they don't dance too well. If you watch them, they kind of do that techno jump up and down to everything out of rhyme and rhythm with what they are dealing with. So that sells, and it's part of this process of emasculation. Now, candidly, full disclosure, my youngest son married a Russian. She was born in Russia, but she was naturalized, and she was a translator, is a translator, or was for the Navy. Now she's a medic, a Corps woman. And I've got a half Russian granddaughter, beautiful, gonna be a movie star, very intelligent. And what they say is going on is Putin is saying he is saving the world from the American and the Western move to emasculate everything, and also saving the world from a resurgence of Nazism. And what do? You can't put a cross under an American flag. You can't put a crescent under American flags on a government flagpole. You can't put the Jewish star under there. You can't put a Buddhist symbol under there, a Hindu symbol under there, but you can put a rainbow flag under there. See, we are being wrapped up in an effort that is unrecognized as such to establish an official religion for this country. Now, the rainbow does not have a deity, but neither does Buddhism. There is no deity for Buddhists. It's a principle of philosophy. There are a lot of gay folk that think LGBTQIA is a cult, and they don't like it either. But this cult has immersed itself into the American mindset, into American politics, into American education, into American sociology, and it's like any new religion. It is filled with overwhelming zeal. It is ruthless. It operates on the basis of by any means necessary. It is appropriate to ruin other people to save them from what they are.
I have a question, right? Being that you witnessed firsthand the transition and the growth, how did the LGBTQ, I forgot the last names, become so powerful?
Because they made it a point 55 years ago, and we heard it often as they pontificated about it. They made speeches about it. They were going to take over entertainment. They were going to take over politics, and they were going to entertain, well, not entertain, but take over news reporting. And they have. See, if you go to Hollywood, LGBTQIA brags that 9 out of every 10 people you see anywhere in Hollywood are affiliated with them. But that is not quite truthful, because Hollywood has a lot of gay people in it, but all of them aren't into LGBTQ. As some of them might put it, LGBTQ is a cult. And just because you're Islamic does not mean that you support Al Qaeda or ISIS. Or if you were a Christian, you didn't support Reverend Jim Jones and drinking a lot of the wrong kind of Kool-Aid at a large church picnic in Guyana either, you see. Or you didn't have to support Branch Davidian. So, it's like, what's being propagandized? Now, there's this thing called brand loyalty. That's what is a weird point about Hollywood in this whole thing. You've heard of Nielsen and their ratings. Well, Nielsen started off 80-some years ago, and what it was for was to give commercial sponsors an idea of what return they were getting on their commercial advertisements.
Oh, something more tangible so you could charge to see, like, you get this much traffic.
So who was going to it? Now, their prime target was females 18 to 24. Why? Because there was an insulting theory that said women are dumb, and if you get them to establish brand loyalty or develop brand loyalty at 18, they'll keep buying that brand for the rest of their lives. You've heard of soap operas? Well, that's because when they originated on radio, they were sponsored by Procter & Gamble, Colgate, Tide soap products, because they were presumed to be bored, stay-at-home housewives, and they would be listening on the radio to these stories that would distract them from the humdrum existence that they thought they were caught up in. Soap operas. So right now, for example, the demographics that spend the most money are males 54 and above. The second highest spending demographic are females 35 to 54 who operate operative families. And it's kind of bad because the demographic that spends the least money are females 18 to 24, but that's the number one target. Now, I remember down here, we had a meeting with KNBC4, which at the time was the largest broadcast station in America, and some of the large commercial sponsors. And my show was their number one moneymaker. And they were talking about, well, Judge, we have a problem here. You just started appealing to these 18 to 24 young women, and you appeal to the ones 35 to 54, but not the ones we're targeting. This dude said, hey, what's wrong with you? I sell Mercedes and Maybachs. They're very expensive automobiles. 18 to 24-year-old females don't buy my automobiles. The people that watch Judge's Card show, they buy my automobiles. The hell with you. You want me to snatch my commercial budget from you? Oh, no, sir, no, sir. And what's the matter with you? Don't you read the 35 through 54-year-old women that love him are the second highest spending group out there? What is the matter with you? So they shut up. They got hit with a commercial reality. And you see, one of the things you have to understand about Hollywood is it does not operate off of money. It operates off of agenda. If you want to see how it works, next time you go to a movie, when it first starts, watch the number of studios or production entities that are affiliated with that movie. They don't have the cash nor the credit to do it all on their own, so they spread it out as sort of a syndicate thing. And they produce movie after movie that happen to be box office flops. For example, they have a thing called Black's List. Black's List was started by a brother named Black. And it's not negative. For the last 25 years, each of the major studios have sent in their best scripts to Black's List, saying these are the best scripts we've encountered this year. And 75% of those scripts got made into movies. But with the exception of just one movie, every single one of them has been a flop because Hollywood doesn't know what makes a good movie. They will spend a lot of money on it and then have a group of people look at it after they spent the money, focus groups, but they don't know what makes it. So I won a $100,000 bet with 10 executives, 10 grand apiece. I said, I'll pick out of your next 10 productions, the ones that are flops and the ones that are hits. I picked every one. How did you know? I said, it's easy. I said, if you go back and examine entertainment throughout human history, they all have a purpose. Whether it's the shaman around the campfire in Africa or on the plains, or you're talking about Shakespeare, or you're talking about Greco-Roman plays, or even John Wayne in a movie. It says something about human nature. This garbage you're putting out doesn't say anything that people need to hear. You're pressed by the lighting. Who gives a damn? What's the purpose of the lighting? You know, the dialogue, what does it say? What is your point being made? And you pick all this garbage that has no point. In the one movie you made out of the whole bunch on Black's List that made it, which was Will Smith and Charlize Theron with Hancock, that had a lot in there that had something to say about something specifically, and it made it. That was the only one in 25 years that hadn't been an absolute flop. Then another thing, James Cameron came into Hollywood peripherally. He is an oceanographer. He did contract work with the U.S. Navy. Undersea
That's
spy.
Avatar?
Yeah. Avatar, Titanic, Abyss. Those are the three highest grossing movies of all time. But they hate him because he's not Hollywood. He did oceanography. He did documentaries to raise money for his oceanography work and got into Hollywood. He's a real world badass. He actually went down the second deepest any human has ever been personally, not quite to the bottom of the Marianas Trench, but 400 feet shallower than two Navy officers went in 1960, all by himself. So he's real life badass. But when he came out with Avatar, which was all-time box office hit, it lost out to Best Movie of the Year to a sorry, poorly done war movie known as Hurt Locker. Why did he lose out? Well, if you checked with LGBTQ a week before the Oscars, you saw who was going to win. See, Oscars are a fraud now. They aren't doing what they're supposed to. And why did Hurt Locker win? Because Hurt Locker was produced and directed by his just divorced wife, who came out as a proud lesbian, so they announced they were rewarding her by giving her Best Movie of the Year, even though the damn thing was an absolute flop, went to Blu-ray 4 days literally after it aired on the movie theaters over Avatar. In fact, since I was a member of SAG-AFTRA, I introduced a resolution saying that when there was a nomination for Best Movie, to avoid insulting the fans, whichever one has the high box office should be presumed to be the Best Movie of the Year. But they didn't want that. It didn't even get a second. So, you see, that's how they operate. They try to condition what you want to see by telling you what you want to see a little bit over the time.
First of all, before we even get into your show, do you believe if you never had that MLK James Earl case, you would have, you would still be presented with the opportunity to do the Judge Joe Brown show?
Yeah. See, one time, almost 40 years ago, I represented the youngest person in the world on death row.
I wanted to bring that up too.
That's how I got.
They wanted
it got worldwide publicity.
Can you explain that case and explain how you got him off death row?
Okay. I got a stay of execution 23 minutes before they're supposed to execute this young man. He was 15 years and 2 weeks old at the time. When he was in the 7th grade, he supposedly murdered 3 people. So they gave him the death penalty in Arkansas. Okay, it was an all-white jury. All kinds of things went wrong, and I got a unanimous verdict from the state Supreme Court in Arkansas to set the conviction aside. So I got a stay from the Chief Justice of the Arkansas Supreme Court and from then Governor Bill Clinton in Arkansas. So they reversed the case, and he wound up dying some years later. Somebody murdered him, but I got him off, okay? Now, that made it big, and in fact, I got a retainer to do a movie or a TV series about it, but I donated it to the family and to the expenses of defending him. I mean, it cost me $50,000, $60,000 out of pocket to defend that boy. And I filed a brief that had to be hardbound, like a dictionary, literally hardbound and printed. It was 12,483 pages long. And the Arkansas Supreme Court had read this thing, and surprisingly enough, the state was all upset because when it was my time to argue, we were talking about the UCLA-Arkansas State football game rather than the case. And the state objected, and the Chief Justice said, "Sit down." I said, "Who are you going to object to? This is the Supreme Court of the state. Attorney Brown's brief is excellent. We know what's going on. I mean, it's sort of a, what do you say in basketball, slam dunk? It's like there's no way we're going to let this stand. We're just here going over the routine, so something more meaningful. We're talking about this football game." So they issued the opinion. But anyway, it is what it is. So that was there. Then, before I got the James Earl Ray case, I had made some hit nationally and internationally off of my sentencing, which was based on a new criminal code that Tennessee adopted in 1988. And I had lobbied for the provision which required that judges use innovative sentencing in lieu of strict incarceration for certain kinds of offenses. So what I was doing was punishing, but giving an incentive through the punishment to people cooperating with what I was trying to do. I was trying to get them out of the trap. What was the trap? The criminal justice system has morphed from a crime control device to a labor control device. See, labor is a commodity like wheat, corn, or cotton. And when you have a glut in a commodity, the price drops. And when the price drops for the commodity of labor, you get pissed off people like Timothy McVeigh, who go buy $200 worth of the most common fertilizer in America, and they blow up a courthouse in Oklahoma City and take down 200 plus people at one time. So anytime you get a commodity glut, you do three things to check it. One, you cut back production. Two, you store subsidize the producer. And three, you store the surplus. We store our surplus in a jail cell instead of a grain silo. The subsidies, the welfare check in perpetuity. And three, the cutting back of production is when the kids tune out, drug out, drop out, get knocked up too early, too often, listen to too much of the wrong kind of presentation where they ideate on the wrong things. They think about being pimps, hoes, drug dealers, and et cetera, instead of something constructive. They carry themselves the wrong way, talk the wrong way. They don't know how to diffuse the situation. They're always angry. They don't have vocational skills or academic excellence. They behave in a certain way, so where they live becomes an island of chaos, and the impacted community cannot use political mass action for constructive purposes, and it's a mess. And then you get good citizens paying attention to their safety, walking from front door to carport rather than getting ripped off economically. And when you store the surplus, there's an enormous market on feeding, clothing, transporting, communications involving them, security, and housing of the surplus.
Can America survive without the prison industrial complex?
No. But it's got to be revised in what it does. And the way to stop it is to do something that every other industrialized nation except ours is doing. And that is come up with programs so that the worker who is made obsolete by industrial technology and computerization becomes or remains viable in the labor market. See, too many people have been loyally serving a company, say driving a forklift for 19 years. They've got savings, a home, etc. They have aspirations, and then they get a pink slip that says, "Bye, sucker, we're downloading for corporate profitability," because some SOB wants to be a billionaire before he hits 55, so you can go forget all your bills and everything you rely upon. It can all go to hell. Now, you see, we don't need that. And some people don't get the right idea about this. Some think that they want to put people in prison so under the 13th Amendment they can get slave labor. They don't want the labor other than to keep somebody from being idle, because idle minds mischief make. Okay, so you want something for them to do to keep them out of trouble. The bottom line is this criminal justice system was not seeking rehabilitation, because if you rehab them, they just reglut the labor market that you won't fix. Leave it to private enterprise. Well, private enterprise is not into charity, it's into making money. Now, what I did to stop the recidivism and what I got some initial fame for was, first off, getting the defendant to understand what he was into. Yeah, man, I pulled it off. No, man, thank you. What do you mean thank you? You mean because I reformed, Judge? No, I'm not thanking you for reforming. I'm thanking you for effing up in the first place. We need you to do that. Thank you for, wait. You want us to do that? Yeah. Don't you get it, man? You getting chumped off because you're doing just exactly what you're supposed to do. This system doesn't work unless you do what you do. Wait a minute, you mean they want me to do these criminalities? Yeah, that's exactly it. Damn. So when you get somebody to thinking about it, and then you get him to thinking about what is your purpose in life? Well, I ain't got no purpose. Well, you could have. And when you give him a cause, see, maybe this guy put on one of these programs 1992. I ran into him when I'm in mine, 3 of them just last week. Judge, you remember us? No, I don't. Well, you gave us some time. Did I give you enough? Well, see, it was this thing about manhood, man. It's like, damn, like I got grandchildren now, man. And, like everybody's doing well. It's like you straightened me up, man. I ain't been back. And see, that was the other secret. I was imposing manhood. And you see, when you take a male and you teach him manhood, he's got a cause that can never leave him. No matter how bad it gets, he doesn't want to die behind it because it's making him angry and it's saying it's adversity. And whether you call adversity Simba or you call it what I have to deal with on a day-to-day basis is a man. It's my task, my obligation, and my privilege to take it on and whip it because I'm part of a team. I'm not alone. And you see, when you do that, you totally alter this guy's perspective and he no longer becomes a thug, something that preys on his community. He does something for it because he perceives himself as being part of something. He's a man of his people and of his community. And when he sees himself that way, he stops messing up like he's been doing.
Did you know Barry White when he was younger in the streets?
Yeah, I did, but he wasn't in the streets.
He wasn't in the streets?
He was 12-year-old, skinny 12-year-old, and he was a kid on a playground I helped run. And we got him together, and his mama went along with the program. Another somebody on that same program, playground, which was Trinity Avenue Elementary School in Los Angeles, California, was a 14-year-old volunteer we had. He was one of the most intelligent kids I've ever run into. His name was Tookie Williams, and he was the last person they executed on California's death row. Schwarzenegger was the governor and refused to commute his sentence to life. I guess it was an embarrassment because Schwarzenegger, used to work out with Tookie at Gold's Gym a lot. They'd spot for each other. So, yeah, all right, but Tookie was a real smart guy. He worked hard. He was a natural-born leader. We had high hopes for him, but his mama wanted that she wouldn't let him out of the swamp, so he just became the baddest alligator in the swamp. Now, to give you an example on what you can do if you have the right kind of leadership, every Wednesday, myself, the late Dr. Clifford Stewart, who is probably one of the most dangerous and foremost martial artists in the world, Ron Chappelle, Dr. Ron Chappelle, we were into one form or another of martial arts, and we ran that playground. Now, every Wednesday, because there were no open movie theaters in South Central, we took 200 kids from 1st through 7th grade, just the 3 of us. We got UCLA to provide the transportation. We got in free at any movie house in downtown Los Angeles. And every time the patrons would just become amazed. You had 200 kids in here? We didn't hear a peep. Because 3 young black men could keep 200 kids quiet, get instant behavior and instant compliance. And if you talk to the parents, they would be lamenting how unruly the children were. We said, no, you just don't know how to deal with them. We do. Now, we had a group of sisters that tried to help out, but they really didn't. They would bring 5 kids in a group they went, and there would be 7 of the women, and they would have those 5 out of control, and the 3 of us would have to jump in and put their 5 under control to get the other 200 back under control. It's just like how you do it. I was a scoutmaster, cub master for 15 years. And we used to take these boys on trips, and some of the mothers would want to go along, and I'd have to say, ma'am, just sit over here on these benches under the shade, would you please? But they're so unruly. Just sit down. I'll have somebody come over here in a couple hours, and you can see what it can be done. How did you get them to do that? I said, they want to be men. All I had to do was show them an example and give them a demonstration of things that we human males have known about for thousands of years that you have no clue about. You see how quickly it works? Just 2 hours. This boy that you said you couldn't get to do anything, look at him. He's putting the plates out on the tables here for everybody to eat off. That one is making sure that the tableware is together. This one is over here making sure that the seats are lined up. That one's over there going to help serve the food. What do you mean you can't? But how did you do that? Because there are things that have worked from cave to the Roman legions to now when we have condos and you don't know about them, but they work.
Judge, obviously you're aware that we live in a society where masculinity is dwindling away, right? I heard they have a thing in China, like a campaign.
Yeah, they started it in January 2021. Man Up. Russia's had
right?
one for 5 years.
Do you feel that America will have to eventually adopt that type of campaign in our society?
It's already there. It's just been suppressed. See, the overwhelming majority of people, man and woman, go for it, but they've been told that they don't. So you have maybe 5% of the population telling 95% what they think. Maybe 20% of what's left believe that's how they think, and the rest of them are saying, what's wrong with me? How come I don't think like that? So somebody needs to tell them, you're thinking normally. It's not you, it's somebody lying to you.
I have a theory, man, in regards to manhood too, is that I believe that because society is so hard, or people aren't trained, as you said, to deal with the hardships of life, I think a lot of men just kind of like cop out, bro.
Well, it's an easy way. Being man is hard.
Yeah.
Ooh, and it's dangerous.
I think that's what's taking place right now.
Yeah, but if you give them a cop out where you say it's okay not to, it's like, oh, hell with that. I'm not going to do all of this. Like, think of it. If you are a man, what manhood means is when the Titanic goes down, you get up out of your seat in the lifeboat and salvation, and you give it to a woman and a child, or a child. Now, what they say is, oh, you can put on a dress and you can get one of those seats in the lifeboat. You don't have to worry about it. Well, what the hell? Everybody goes down then. So, you see, it's an easy way. Black folk got to stand up, man up, do what you have to do. But if you get told you don't have to, it's all right, then you have a cop-out. And a lot of black folk are applying for a new status. I don't want to be black anymore, so I want to turn in my application to something else. Oh, here, they'll take me over there. And that's what you have with the lack of representation in our cause with the so-called Black Caucus in Congress. They're surrogates for something else, certainly not us. And I look at their record of introduced bills and everything else over the last 35 years, and it's an abject failure. Just completely and embarrassingly failing. I went back 35 years to 1988, and it's just disgusting.
97% of people plead guilty, but they are not found guilty. Please tell me how economics and racism plays a role in plea deals, and what would happen if more people decided to actually go to trial.
For the last 50 years, I don't care whether the defendant's white, black, brown, red, yellow, 97+% of the defendants in a penitentiary have pled guilty. Just a little more than 2% got found guilty. 84 to 87% confessed. Now, I'll get back to that in a second. One of the problems is that we as a people make it very easy to become caught up in that. Because remember, the whole system isn't about control of crime. It's about control of surplus labor. So if from the start you have not gotten a vocational skill, you have not promoted your academic standing, you are going to be a primary target. Plus, you look the part. You can't blend in. I have a 2-block rule. See, white folk, Mexicans, Asians, everybody, they kind of blend in, particularly since they have the same kind of hair from 2 blocks away. You can tell us looking by the shade, by the walk, by the hair from 2 blocks away. So you become a target for your appearance, and you serve a vital function for the whole country by being that target. But what happens is also how we deal with the situation. I had a set of first-degree murder cases in my courtroom, 6 co-defendants that the state was demanding the death penalty on. They carried off a contract killing. The people who took the contract out, carried it, had it set up, couldn't prosecute them because they kept their mouths shut and just said, hell with you, I want a lawyer, I've got nothing to say. The rest of them fessed up because they get scared. And they're always scared. You see, fright, yielding to fright is not a man thing because you're supposed to be brave, but they're not really brave because what looks like bravery is an effort to get killed. You know, you've heard of suicide by cop. There's also suicide by neighbor and suicide by drug. And then when we get to the confession, oh yeah, see, they made the brother, confess, they tortured. Nuh-uh. I know this from being a criminal defense lawyer, and you can't tell somebody what your client has told you in confidentiality, and what you hear them telling their parents and their homies ain't what they told you. Nor when you're the judge in one of the highest crime areas in the United States, had the 5th largest state criminal jurisdiction in Memphis, by absolute numbers in America. It went LA, New York, Chicago, Dallas, Memphis, Houston, Miami, and Detroit in that order. And gentlemen, are we going back to chambers? Are you ready to go back to chambers so we can look at the tape of the alleged confession? Yes, sir. All right, Madam Court Reporter, can you set up in 10 minutes? All right, everybody in court's chambers in 10 minutes. And you're looking at this, and in your mind's eye, you just saw the defendant out in the courtroom when we take a recess, and he's talking over the barrier to his homies. Yeah, man, I was upholding, man. I was standing firm, man. They trying to put this case on me, man, but I'm protecting the posse, man. And you get back to it, you look at the confession, and not only have they thoroughly advised him of his rights, this detective is telling the guy, look, young man, you really need to get a lawyer. This is a very serious case. I don't want no lawyer. I just want to talk to my mama. You let me talk to my mama. I swear to God. Give him a Kleenex. Wipe your face. Can you stop a little bit? I want my mama. It wasn't me. It was stuff in the last man. He shot down there and they be doing, man. I swear to God, man, let me talk to my mama. First off, it's embarrassing, Oh, you look at this, so you go back and you say, excuse me, these individuals seem to have an interest, and I said, you came in here to testify about a bond reduction? You're short dog, right? You're a little stomp. You stomp, you're little Earl, so take them into custody. These are the ones you've been looking for on this case. No bond set. The defendant, in his confession, was crying, mucus running all down his face, crying for his mother, literally. And he implicated these individuals as suspect in these multiple homicides, so.
What is the disconnect between, because I tell young brothers too that, like, man, with the crime thing, one, you always have to do it with somebody, and that person's going to tell, right? But it's like, it's a disconnect between the music, the movies, and the reality.
Yeah, usually the people that give you the imagery have no part in it, and they get themselves caught up in street mess trying to get cred, and they get blown away, done in, because they don't know how to handle what they're doing. Some of them, for example, were little nerds going through high school, but you wouldn't know that by the way they get presented. They were smart. I mean, they have facility with the language and rhymes and, all kinds of stuff and metaphors, so they're not unintelligent. It's just that you see, if you listen to the music, 60 years ago, it's got a job, got lots of money because it just got paid, but nobody to be with or somebody lamenting circumstances. And now it's a glorification of pimps, hoes, drug dealers, and everything negative.
Drug using. That's the next thing, junkie generation,
Yeah, but you see, the generation is not one. We've got two generations that have been into this. See, the first baby boomer was born 1946, and the last one was 1965 or early 66, depending upon how you deal with it. Then from 66 on, you got another 18 to 20 year period, and then you got another one after that, and now we're into the third one since the baby boomers panned out. So you've got three generations that are being brought up with negativity and the wrong kind of ideation. And the difference between these last three and the baby boomers is, what'd you say, boy? Bam! I don't want to hear this. Like this video that's been going around on X, used to be Twitter. This father is working, and he comes in, and his little daughter is twerking. He pops on her, but what's wrong with you? And everybody going, he had no right to do that. Yeah, he did. That's his daughter. Old dime stuff. But you see, fools have been propagandized into thinking that's wrong. And it didn't even start out with black folk. It was Dr. Spock, who wrote an insane thing back 1961 and 62 saying you should never strike children, you should always reason with them. So I guess instead of having instant discipline that matches what the real world does to you when you mess up, it doesn't explain till it happens right now, bam, you're gone and done. John Wick. Consequences. Everything has consequences. In the real world, absolutely everything has consequences. People win, and by winning you live sometimes, and by losing you die sometimes. But the school system says no competition, no first, second, third place, everybody gets participation ribbon. They put this fantasy that they raise the children into where you're entitled just because you want it, you're supposed to get it. Forget the hard work earning it. You're just supposed to get it. And that says there are no rules. You can do anything you want to because a lot of them are frustrated by being teachers. I used to teach school too. I was a substitute, high school and junior high out in LA. Put myself through law school doing that. Okay, now, what happens with that is a lot of the teachers aren't really there because they want to teach. They're there because that's the best they can do as they perceive it under their circumstances, and they feel something's wrong with the way they're getting treated. Memphis, Shelby County. Memphis surrendered its school charter to the county, and they fired all of the high-paid teachers with master's degrees and PhDs with 25, 30 years of experience, and they hired a bunch of them with just 2-year associate degrees. They don't even need a 4-year degree anymore, and they start them off at $28,000 to $32,000 a year with no benefits. Who the hell are you bringing in to be school teachers?
I was just going to ask, bro. Sound like private prison workers.
Yeah, exactly. And what they're bringing in is little feministas who have a girlfriend, or they might be more into the normal thing where they've got a husband or a boyfriend they're helping to put through, get an MBA, law degree, dental degree, medical degree, or something. And they want their student loans forgiven by teaching 2 years in the inner city school.
That's the big hustle.
Yeah, so that becomes what you get, so you don't get competence. Now, when I went to school, I had just as many man teachers almost, junior high school and high school. In fact, more than I did female teachers. And when your teacher was a tech sergeant in the Army and he's taking active hard fire, that's a hell of a lot different from the type of teacher you have right now. When you got somebody that was in World War II or Korea, and he grabbed, he said, boy, what did you just say? What did you say? Oh, Mr. Phelps, I swear to God, man, I didn't know, watch your mouth, boy.
You know how it go. You see with men, when there's a certain level of respect and you know it could get to that level, it kind of tones down what you're going to say.
Well, not only agreement with the parent. See, I'm a lot older than you. When I went to school, I saw this. Mr. Johnson was in there, and some parent got irate with him. He snatched the parent by the collar and threw him on the wall. What did you say? Do you really want to go that way? He said, we can do that too. Oh, swear to God. I'm not the father. I'm just the mother's boyfriend, man. I don't want no part of this. Yeah, okay, now get out of here. Now you. It's like it's authority. And that's the way the real world works. It's like I ran into one of these guys years later and I said, I really appreciate what you did. Well, look, son, it's like this. You make a mistake, sometimes it was unavoidable. You could go left or you could go right. Neither one of them was the right way to go. And you took your chances. Or sometimes you said, I shouldn't do that, but you did it. And you saw other people suffer, something blown off, face shot off, killed, whatever it may be, got done in so badly they wish they were dead. You got to seriously thinking about what was going on and you assumed you already were dead. But be careful about how you die. So when you started thinking about things like that and I heard this word my whole life, consequence. You start behaving in a certain fashion, but now there's no consequence. It's just like everybody's going to protect you. I used to go to these functions out in Hollywood at first. It'd be lawn parties at somebody's big mansion. It sounded like a gathering of child psychologists. Jonathan, don't you think there's a better way for you to do this? Mother has been trying to get you to understanding. I don't want it, Mama. Jonathan, you're going to make Mother very upset. I don't care, Mother. I'll take a 15-minute time out. But Jonathan, this isn't the wise thing to... Damn, snatch the little fool. At one time, one little punk was climbing in some trees. His mother was trying to get down. She started crying. Jonathan, you're making Mother cry. I don't care, Mother. I'm going to climb in the trees. I like it. Well, the tree broke. He got a hairline fracture in his wrist, it turns out. They called the ambulance. The ambulance crew went off on the bomb and said, we've got all these people dying out here in Los Angeles and you 2 blocks from the emergency. Why don't you just take the child over there? Oh my God, he might, like the child should have listened to you. That's why you told him to get down out of the tree. And he's thinking he's going to get a convenience time out. Mother Nature doesn't work that way.
I want to talk about your show real quick, right? You had a very long run. You had 15 years. Seems like you had a very good deal where you also received a percentage of the profits generated from the show. Was that the standard for that type of show?
No, it wasn't, but it's what I negotiated because they kept cheating. You have to put away $150,000 to exercise what you should always have as a contract provision, which is a right to inspect their books. They usually exclude their tax records, but you can see everything else. But it costs you $150K to set up an audit. You usually have to wait a whole year and you got to file a complaint under the typical contract within a year to do that. So what happens is when they know that you got them and they cheated, what they wind up doing is offering you a pretty good thing. So in other words, my situation was they were offering me 45% of the unadjusted gross on the show. And one thing that I was smart enough to do, since I was over 50 when I got involved in this and it represented clients dealing with this kind of thing, was you buy a few shares of stock in the corporate entity, which means you get the corporate newsletter. and they either lied to the stockholders, which is 10 years in a federal penitentiary, or they're lying to you. So when they're telling you that you're the most profitable show that they have, literally that was for CBS, greatly responsible for 14 consecutive quarters of growth in profit as the lowest overhead major show they had, and they're telling you where they took some of the profit, since it's Viacom, to leverage out Tom Cruise movies such as Mission Impossible, and how many tens of millions of dollars, and then you say, wait, where's my 45%? Well, or 25%. Well, I'll tell you what, we made an error here. Yeah, and what about the first CEO that embezzled $25 million in cash from the whole thing out there? Well, if you, yeah, okay, fine. So it ramped up. So after 15 years of this nonsense, I just said, you know what, I'm over retirement age, I quit. So at that time, I was the #2 syndicated show in America behind Judge Judy, and it was Judge Judy, Joe Brown, Oprah Winfrey, and Dr. Phil. Now, Oprah's a superstar, Phil's supposed to be a superstar, Judy was supposed to be a superstar, but it was me that was beating everybody but Judy, and every time I started beating her in certain markets, they'd change her rating schedule. They wanted to keep me down so badly that in Los Angeles, which was the second largest TV market in the country at the time, they wouldn't even carry me in TV Guide. And the #1 question is the judge's show still on? We don't see it. So they would tell them. But still, it was generating a hell of a lot of income, and I'm looking at the corporate thing, and you listen to the executives, well, everybody got to take a hit time. Oh, you're lying. They gave you an 11% raise January 17th. Okay, so don't lie to me. How'd you know that? Because I get the corporate newsletter, fool.
So real quick, right? Why do you believe your show was so successful?
Because it was real reality, and because it is. Up until the Lindbergh trial in the 1930s, the #1 form of entertainment in America was its courtrooms. Not the opera, not ballet, not plays, not even the movies. It was courts. And when I tried cases in upcountry Tennessee as a lawyer, they'd have huge courtrooms that seated 250 people. And if you had a case going on, it would be packed. And if it was spring or fall out there in the court square, they would have 400 or 500 people on picnic blankets listening to the loudspeakers because of the drama, the intrigue, the oratory that went on with a trial. So we just restored that.
That makes sense, because the #1 thing now is this crime. Everything is crime. People tune into, right?
Yeah, and you'd get a chance to listen to the real thing. Now, I was unusual amongst all the court shows because I was sanctioned by the California Supreme Court. They said what I was doing was official under the California arbitration, mediation, and judicial statutes, and I had the authority to find people in contempt, lock them up, and any award that I came up with was enforceable in the state of California. Now, we did it under binding contractual arbitration. And in 2007, the U.S. Supreme Court said that was officially binding on the whole country under the U.S. Arbitration Act of 1928. And they specifically in California issued this report 23 years ago in writing that I was qualified as an arbitrator. So that was the difference between me and everybody else. And I refused to take any case that had not been filed in somebody else's small claims court. Now, Judy had some of the same crew that was working on my show, so I set that up and she used it too, or they used it for her, which is everybody's got to have a real live case before they get in here.
And tell me about November 1998. It seems like you had a little situation where they tried to get a woman to lie and say you sexually abused them.
Oh, what happened was this. The show had been operating since September 16th or 18th, I think. And what happened, they had a big corporate get together at one of the big hotels in LA. So I was dancing with all these women, stars and soap operas and movies and TV. They were pretty, and I was a bachelor in my early 50s. I was having a good time. So I sat down with this one woman, and we'd kind of hit it off, and we were talking. She excused herself to the ladies' room, came back and said, "You know that tall guy over there in the gray suit?" I said, "Yeah." He was actually the CEO for the show. He said he offered me $2,000 in cash if I'd signed this note saying you tried to feel on me.
What was that about?
It was a setup so they could get control of you. So we went around and she interviewed the women, everyone we could find that I had danced with, and she got a written statement from them that this guy had also come and propositioned them. So about a month and a half later, I hired this beautiful sister. Well, I didn't hire her, but I knew her. She was somebody I'd mentored. She's a former Miss Washington, D.C., and at one time the youngest licensed lobbyist on Capitol Hill, so they were trying to kill the show. Mel Gibson and the producers moments. If the show was a flop, you could steal more money than you could make if it was a hit. So I put on my own PR program, and we put up a sting operation. She started confiding in the wife of the CEO about this fictitious woman. We set it up, and at each stage, she and I filed joint affidavits, sworn, and we had them put in a lockbox sealed with human resources. So we detailed the setup. So sure enough, as we predicted, they come up with this letter from this fictitious woman complaining that I tried to proposition her for sex in return for employment. So when we got over there in front of all of the executive types for Paramount, which had the show then, I said, "Go to hell, I quit, screw you. By the way, I'm gonna sue every one of you punks." And human resources, I had come over with the lockbox. They broke the seal. I had one key, they had the other one. And we opened it up. I had my witness, a beautiful former Miss Washington, D.C., first runner-up Miss America there. And we went through the affidavits of how we set them up. So in 6 weeks, none of them were there, and I was there for almost 14 more years. So see, there's some low-down scoundrels, but they try to run that. Now the difference between me and most of the other people they run it on is I wasn't teenage, early 20s, trying to break in. I grew up in Los Angeles, and I'm plus 50, and I've had a long career in the law. I've been a judge, so I've been a defense lawyer, prosecutor, ran the public defender's office in the area, so I know what time it is. So I set them up.
Can you tell me what you just made a statement saying that they can make more money on a flop show than a successful show?
Yeah.
Break down, how does that work?
See, in other words, when the money changes hands, briefly, they can steal it or divert it to other purposes. And if the show flops, everybody says, "Oh, what the hell, it didn't work," and they move on to something else. That's why I suspect that stuff like Lovecraft Country, which was a pretty good thing, got victimized by that kind of thing, and a few other movies or productions I've seen. In other words, people put stuff out about what's wrong with the cast and crew, or this person's difficult to work with, that person is hard to get along with, and it's just a lie to cover up the fact that they're killing it off and they're stealing it. You get a lot of people that go back a long way in Hollywood. In any other industry, they'd be at war, but they giggle about how they've stabbed each other in the back. And you're looking at this, listening to this, and saying, man, any other thing in America, somebody'd have some broken kneecaps behind this. So they drink wine and giggle about how they have backstabbed each other, and that's just part of it. You get somebody that's been fired 39 times, And on time 40, he gets fired, and he gets hired for time 41 2 weeks later, making more money.
I heard you once say that Bill Cosby was under surveillance by the FBI during the 70s.
Yeah, everybody was. J.Edgar Hoover was what he was, but something was wrong with him. And the FBI had everybody under surveillance. They had Martin Luther King under surveillance, Andrew Young, Stokely Carmichael, H. Rap Brown, Huey Newton, Eldridge Cleaver. They had Mayor Tom Bradley of Los Angeles under it. They just snooped on everybody. And I find it astonishing that the Black Caucus acts like the FBI has been our friend. The FBI was created to get a black man, Jack Johnson, the first black world heavyweight champion. He had a white wife, and she and her girlfriends used to hang around him, and they thought that was horrible, so the FBI was created to investigate that. They came up with the Mann Act, which most recently they got R. Kelly under. And it was just awful what they did. J. Edgar Hoover considered black militancy as a poison, a disgrace, and a hotbed for communist subversion, and something that would overthrow the American way of life. And interestingly enough, if you look at pictures of him as a young man, you can see why. And if you look at what the Smithsonian Channel and the History Channel have been putting out over the last few years, he was a black man. Now, there is a couple that matches the name of his parents, but they had a child that died back in 1921, just one child. That's not J. Edgar Hoover. If you look at the other one, you will see two black people who are very, very fair-skinned, and they got run out of Louisiana for trying to pass for white by the Klan. Now, paradoxically, Hoover used to hate the Klan with an extreme passion because of that. But he didn't like his own people. And the Klan was a good thing for the FBI to be after. But black people became his fetish in terms of going after. So everybody that was active back in the 60s well remembers getting hauled into an FBI headquarters and interrogated about something you said or that you were presumed to have done. And a word of advice: if federal agents talk to you, never say you don't know anything about it. Just say, I refuse to make a statement. I have nothing to say to you. Because ordinarily they'll tell you what you have been brought in for. And you say, I don't know anything about it. Well, they just told you something about it. And when they indict you on 17 counts, 29 counts, if you've got a good lawyer, he can get you acquitted on all counts but the last one, which is making a knowingly false statement to a federal agency or agent, and they get the client on that, he's convicted. And by the way, I'm looking at some of the stuff that's going on right now, and some of the people that have been involved in some things are liable to be prosecuted for making knowingly false representations to federal agencies, perhaps grand juries and stuff like that. And I'm going to laugh when what is inevitable becomes reality.
Can you let people know? I think because of the whole situation that happened with Bill Cosby, people forget the amount of work that he did and the support he gave other black people. Can you share with the people Bill Cosby helped financially that you're aware of over the years?
Bill Cosby helped a lot of people. But see, most importantly to this mix, first time he ran into problems was when he got the financing together to acquire NBC. You did not want a person like Cosby to control NBC as a corporate entity. Then he got it again. Then they started bringing all this stuff out of the woodwork. And he got an assurance from the elected district attorney, the office of district attorney, that there would be no prosecution. Fifth Amendment says that you have a right to remain silent. You cannot be compelled to give evidence against yourself. But in a civil case, you can. So when the DA issued that written edict that there was no intention to prosecute, that they found the case was frivolous anyway, the civil judge ordered him to comply with the deposition request in a civil action that had been brought against him. Well, he admitted the acts, but not the intent. He said, she wanted this. This is what I gave her. This was like sex, drugs, and rock and roll all through the 60s and 70s. It was a thing. So the new district attorney said, screw that, we're not going to be bound by the agreement. Well, she had to be because it was the office. So that was Fifth Amendment. I said that from the front end. They've got no business going here because all they're trying to do is ruin this man. And when they locked him up, he tells me, and I talked to him, he said they offered me over and over the opportunity to get out of jail within a week if I just say, okay, they're right. He said, hell no, I'm not going to do that. It's a matter of principle. So inevitably, he got acquitted because of the Fifth Amendment violation. This group now does not care about compliance with the law, which is the scariest thing going. Not what they're claiming other people have done, but this violation. Now, what's happened in the name of being politically correct is to a legalist rather astonishing. For example, in most states, if somebody took a baseball bat to you and hit you in the face with the baseball bat, knocked out half your teeth, broke your jaw in 3 places, you'd have 1, at most 2 years to bring a civil action. Meanwhile, if you're a woman and somebody squeezes your ass, you got 30 years. It doesn't make any sense because in the name of being politically correct, you're doing something that is against the law. Now, you shouldn't abuse women, but the bottom line is the law deals with humans, and it says at some point you need to get on with your life. Either do something on the pot or get off.
But also just with time and space, won't the story get distorted as your distance from the experience?
Yeah, that's tell a tale long enough and loud enough, anybody will believe it. And see, there were all kinds of things that went wrong with the Cosby case. In fact, some of those women that were on that, what was it, McCall's or something magazine that all claimed to have been molested by Cosby. See, I recognized some of them, and that was from parties at the Hollywood mansions where it was sex, drugs, and rock and roll, where the person would show up, take a coat off, see-through, no bra. 15 minutes later, a bottom off, and she's running around in thongs, and in a half hour, she's completely naked, and she's hitting the coke and the fine wine, and you know, you go to the bathroom and you gotta wait, and then she comes out wiping her lips, holding somebody's hand, or you go to get your coat and she's screwing somebody on top of your coat, or you go back to another party and there they are 3 or 4 days later doing the same thing. So it's kind of like you choose to jumpstart your career, you don't have that great of a talent thing anyway, and it doesn't work. Now you get old and over the hill. It isn't your fault, and then you get people like Gloria Aldrich. Meanwhile, I can recall a conversation with her at an Emmy party. She'd been drinking wine, and she was bragging about how she extorted these celebrities by threatening to come up with complaints against them unless they paid to settle something. So, I mean, it's a vicious thing. And to show you where it's going, back here, there's a move afoot to add a special type of felony rape by seduction. Now, what the hell does that mean? That means if a guy and a gal go out and it's springtime and they go to a nice restaurant, have a good dinner over candlelight, nice wine, and they go for a walk in the park and they're holding hands and your place of mine, and they get over to wherever they go, kissing and hugging, clothes come off, and nature takes its course. Well, that's supposed to be rape by seduction. What they claim is supposed to happen is, honey, you know I'm horny. How about if we go to dinner and then we get it on afterwards? Is that all right? Well, hell, that'll get you nowhere, because that's some lame-ass style.
So if everything's not laid out prior to the event, someone can argue that you were raped by seduction.
Yeah, that's supposed to be rape by seduction, felony.
So is this going to pass?
No, but they're pushing it. But that just shows you where they're coming from. Like, excuse me.
But when did that change human interaction?
Well, that's the point. In other words, look, how do you think humans run this mating game? Look at all these people around here. Most of these people were fortunate enough for that seduction and, you know, thing to have worked out. That's how you get people. That's the human courtship ritual thing. So you want to change all of that because nobody's interested in you? See, it doesn't work that way. And then you hate men because of what you think they've done to you? Well, okay. I think anybody that hates women is crazy. Anybody that hates men is crazy. But see, there is this thing that I saw 55 years ago that's come to the forefront, is men and women are different. They're equal in value, but they're not equal in what they do. And some people have a problem with that. Now, let's take one example I can think of right now. One of the most powerful women in history, Cleopatra, all right? What did she do to get insinuated with Julius Caesar, probably the most powerful man in the ancient Roman world? Allegedly, she had herself wrapped up naked in a carpet and taken over by a slave and unrolled in front of Caesar at his feet. So,
seduction.
Yeah, seduction. She seduced him. See, it works both ways. A lot of women hate it, but you know, you're driving down the street, somebody cuts you off. God, oh shit, damn, baby, cut me off again. You know, hell, damn, man, you see that? Damn. You know, so nature is nature. And people talk about objectification of beauty. Yeah. If we didn't objectify beauty, we'd still all be looking like chimpanzees. But we don't.
Judge, I just want to jump back real quick. Can you list, if you remember, the amount of, I just want people to know the amount of people that Bill Cosby helped when they were in dire situations.
Oh, yeah. Well, what I was getting to is I talk about generic categories. Bill Cosby helped a lot of people. See, it was a role model. He became an exemplar of what you could be if you sat down at the kitchen table and paid attention to your homework. He was playing part of a family where one of them was a physician and one of them was a lawyer. Now, that's supposed to be a fantasy in some people's mind. Hey, that don't happen. Yeah, it does. And I know couples, lawyer, doctor, two doctors, two lawyers. And they came out to projects, old-time projects, you know, came out of South Central, came out of all kinds of hoods around the country. They made it. And that's because instead of yielding to the temptation of doing nothing, they sat at that kitchen table and they busted their ass from kindergarten through 12th grade. You do that and the rest of your life is wide open to you. You can do whatever you want. And the problem is too much of this is predicated on that's not what we think we ought to do. And Bill Cosby was trying to say, this is what you ought to do. This is what you can be. This is the way it's supposed to work. You see how I'm talking to my children right here? I'm being reasonable with them, but I'm putting down the rules, and my wife is backing me up by she's saying, let the beatings begin. You know, if you get out of this on his joke albums, that's a reality. You see, he's trying to help all those people. He loaned money to people. He gave people advantage. He got wrapped up in something that a lot of the current last three generations don't get, which is In the 60s and 70s, there was this thing called sex, drugs, and rock and roll, the sexual revolution, where having sex with somebody was about as casual as having a slow dance at a house party with somebody you already knew. And that was the flavor. It happened all the time. So now it looks like it's odd. It looks like it's something, oh my God. But we've got some screwed up dynamics. Right now, for example, there are more boy virgins 25 and under than there are girl virgins. There are more boys who stay at home with a parent 30 years of age and under, 35 and under, than there are girls. Only 44% of the American workforce is male. Only 28% of each year's high school graduates for the last 20-some years are male. Only 32% of the college undergrads are male. Only 36% of the grad students are male. Something's happening.
There's a great book called Boy Crisis. I forgot the name, something Farrell. But he really breaks down how basically men have just given up.
No, they haven't given up.
Go ahead.
They've been taught.
They've been taught to.
Because you see, you had people like poetress Nikki Giovanni going around in the late 60s saying the worst thing you could do is have a father in a child's life. The best thing was to get pregnant. Don't tell the SOB he was the daddy. You can do better on your own.
She was really saying that?
We cussed her out at a BSU meeting at UCLA 1968 for saying that in front of 10,000 people.
Hold on. The lady that did the interview with
Yeah, that one.
She said that?
She said that 2 occasions, 1967, 1968, at UCLA. I was witness to her in a room a little bigger than this, UCLA BSU. We met with her afterwards, and several of us took offense at what she was saying.
Did she ever explain the purpose, the reason?
Yeah, she hated men.
But she seems like I don't know her, right? But she seems like a
person. You got to know who you're following. But you see, this kind of thing was poisonous, and it was not good for anybody. But see, when you start getting this kind of propaganda put out by people that become trusted, and you get made to trust them or induced to trust them by false representation, it is what it is. See, Bill Cosby did so much for black folk, and then now we've got this negativism because he was a man, a strong man, so he has to be destroyed because there is an agenda. Nikki Giovanni, who spoke poison for the black family, is glorified. Bill Cosby, who was just doing what we all did, except he was prominent, and maybe he didn't take the precautions the rest of us did, or maybe he became too big a target, which some of us never became. They went after him. Well, hell, recently I got victimized by that nonsense. There's a certain woman that played Moesha's mother on the TV show. She said some TV judge, famous, stuck his tongue down her throat, sexually assaulted her, and it wasn't Judge Mathis. Well, some idiots assumed it was me. It wasn't. It was Mayor Koch of New York, who became judge of People's Court at the time this is supposed to have happened, worked with the same studio, and that was at the same NAPTY event in 1996 when yours truly was dealing with James Earl Ray. Now, you see, that's what we try to do, just subtle efforts to discredit people. So now people, well, you know, you've been guilty. No, I haven't. I haven't done anything except protect womanhood for years and years. And I got a whole bunch of women that will attest to how I saved them from a burglar or would-be rapist, to stop somebody from hijacking their purse on the street, all kinds of stuff. So, yeah, where'd you get this? Well, I heard. Well, you heard wrong. See, that's the way they do this.
I heard you speak about Thurgood Marshall during his resignation speech.
Talk about Clarence Thomas.
He made a quote about black leaders that seemed pretty accurate. Can you speak about that?
Well, you're talking about Clarence Thomas. I heard it live, and what he got asked was, can you tell us who the next nominee is going to be to replace you? He said, well, that wouldn't be appropriate. He said, well, let me just say this. I'll say one thing. He said, a black snake will bite you just as quick as a white one. Now, you'll find out what I mean soon enough. Now, Clarence Thomas, he's been of use lately with Second Amendment and First Amendment stuff. But Clarence Thomas has I got an interesting personal connection with him. He doesn't know anything about, but it's this. I never wanted to be a lawyer. I didn't want to go to law school. Thanks to Ronald Reagan, St. Ron the Reagan. Well, I wound up with a situation where the norm is out there and you need to get your degree and go on, but University of California was getting defunded thanks to him. And there would be a long wait, and there was a sunny vacation in the NOM awaiting. So a faculty advisor said, you know, you've taken enough courses I'm looking at in political science to declare that as a major if you want. I said, what the hell am I going to do with that? He said, well, go to law school. I don't want to go to law school. Well, take the LSAT, LSAT, Law School Aptitude Test. I said, what for? He said, take it. So I took it, and all of these law schools tried to recruit me. Later, I found out just how high I had scored on the thing. I didn't even pay attention to it. So Yale tried to recruit me. So Yale wanted me to come in so they could get the parameters to set up a minority admissions program. They didn't even call it affirmative action then. And by the way, I helped set that up at UCLA back in the 60s. So I know what that's about. And it's not the way they've been playing it. But anyway, we'll get back to this. So I declined to go to Yale. I just said, hell, man, you got 5 feet of snow on the ground. There's no grass around here. The campus comes right up to the sidewalk. You know, the building comes to the sidewalk. Then there's the street. What the hell? I'm going to UCLA, man. All these beautiful women out in UCLA. You know, I'm staying there. So some years later, it turns out that Clarence Thomas is the last person admitted in their first year of affirmative action at Yale. They told me when they were trying to recruit me that it was impossible to flunk out because Yale will not admit to making a mistake about its admittees. And if anything, the person would be allowed to withdraw and try again, or just withdraw and go somewhere else. So he got into some academic problems, allegedly, in his first year and wasn't making it. So over the summer, they marched him around all over the country, and he spoke against affirmative action. And then the conservative professor on the staff said, oh, I made a mistake. Changed his grade, and he stayed in. And then the next summer, he went all around the country and spoke against affirmative action. When he graduated, since he graduated from Yale, he didn't have to take the bar. He was waived in the state in question. And
that's how it works?
Yeah, that's how it works in some states. So he was in the tax department for this state attorney general's office, but he never did any tax. They had him travel around the country talking against affirmative action. So the Reagan administration got in 1980, and they wanted to kill off Equal Employment Opportunity Commission as sort of a pest. It actually did some good things back then. I worked for them at one time. Well, they made him a director of EEOC. He wasn't even 30 years old. And then as a reward, even though he had never had a case, even though he had never set foot in a courtroom, they made him an appellate judge on the Second Circuit Court of Appeals. Then as a further reward, when Thurgood Marshall retired, they wanted him on the Supreme Court, and the theory was is nobody would dare to attack a black nominee to replace Thurgood Marshall. So we have somebody we can sneak in who is very conservative nominally, but gets in because he's black. We've had that happen again several times. But they got him in, and Anita Hill, who I had several long conversations with, said, look, when they came to me and they said Second Circuit Court of Appeals, I started to say something. I said, but he's just one junior level appellate judge. Okay. When he got nominated for Supreme Court, yeah, I had to say something. So what she was saying rang true. And she wasn't lying. So you get Clarence Thomas, who basically endorsed, rubber stamped whatever Scalia did. Scalia was supposed to be a conservative genius, but if you actually read his stuff, you'd say, what is this? Supreme Court is supposed to be coming up with these profound rules that operate to control the whole country's judiciary. And he's coming up with ad hoc decisions that don't set any precedent and relying on his own dissents as precedents, which is not done, but he did what he did. So Scalia dictated to Thomas, it looks like, what was done. Thomas was Rush Limbaugh's best man at Limbaugh's last wedding, and Limbaugh was Thomas's best man. So that just gives you the connection that they have. Now, what happened with Thomas is something similar to what happened with J.Edgar Hoover. He hated his own people. With due respect, his real mother was allegedly a prostitute, and his father had a rich father who was Thomas's grandfather. The grandfather owned a whole bunch of rental properties and adopted Clarence. So Clarence had a very, very upscale black upbringing. And he and everybody he hung out with went to college. That's his background. But he despised and detested, it seems, where he came from. And he always went against that. It's like some judges I'm aware of over the last 50 years, they got run home too many times from high school to junior high school, so every time somebody came in front of them that reminded them, they got revenge. And some of the worst people, when it comes to their own people, are getting revenge against their own people. So that was Clarence Thomas. But I must say he has been of some use with Second Amendment stuff and First Amendment things, which are under intense attack right now. So he has his utilities. But I'm particularly offended by this latest Supreme Court selection off of the Second Circuit, because I can think of at least two women on the Second Circuit who should have been nominated but weren't. One of whom I know is Rogerie Clifton. She was married to a good friend of mine and one of my mentors. She should have been nominated. That's on the Second Circuit. I can think of some other black female judges around the country who should have been nominated. Judge Bernice Donald from Memphis, who's on the Sixth Circuit Court of Appeals. She used to be with the Public Defender's Office, and I mentored her, and she's an excellent lawyer for the people and justice for the people. But this woman was being an obvious shill for certain rainbow interests when she said she couldn't define what a woman was. Hell, she could have said she was one. But that was a deliberate sop, and I am really distressed with our appellate courts because so many of the members, like Clarence Thomas, never had any experience representing real people.
Disconnected.
Yeah, they don't know what it's like when somebody's sitting on the other side of that desk and you're eyeballing somebody, and all of that theoretical stuff that you get in law school has to be translated to the reality. They've never been in front of a jury, and being in front of a jury for a lawyer is like a doctor going through a residency program or an internship. In other words, you learn your trade. You learn that this fanciful language has some realities when you started talking about defining the assault to the jury. And you can say, man, ladies and gentlemen of the jury, what the judge is basically going to charge you means that Jackson went upside Short Dog's head and did a ooh-wee on him. Like, hey, this is where we are. So real law can get to be amusing. I had an old white chancellor 45 years ago walk up to me and say, Lloyd Brown, what'd you think of that? He said, real opinion. I said, that's ridiculous. He said, yes, sir, it was. It's absolutely stupid, dumb, and ridiculous, but sometimes you got to have a sense of humor or this crap will drive you crazy. By the way, sometimes you need to listen to a good stand-up comedian, because the way they approach humanity will give you a good clue in how to present stuff to a jury. Plus, if you keep the jury wide awake and entertained, they'll pay more attention to you and go to sleep on the other son of a bitch who's putting them to sleep. So I always used to entertain juries. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, yes, sir, this morning we got a situation here. And I'm famous for a complete line that I came up with. It was a first-degree murder case. There were 4 co-defendants. 3 of them are sitting on death row. My client never went to jail. I wound up tricking this damn fool who was an idiot for a judge who had formerly run, well, he'd been Grand Dragon for the Klan and chairman of the White Citizens Council, but always got the black bloc vote. He was an idiot. He's now dead. I used to cuss him out when I became a judge at most of the judicial meetings we'd have. And I got him to try to rank me out by transferring the case to another judge who was a fair one. Well, the main witness for the state was this prostitute. She shows up cut down to her navel, you know, low cut and split skirt, hiked all up, and I managed to get 9 church-going ladies on the jury, 3 guys. I made sure they were at least 40, 45-ish, and they went to church a lot. And my client could testify, his daddy was a preacher. So the dad walked in and out of the back of the courtroom. He was fine down immaculately, looking good. And the ladies kept staring at him. So when I put him on the stand, I said, who is that distinguished-looking gentleman walking in and out of the back of the courtroom? Oh, that's my father, Reverend so-and-so. So all the women were, oh, you know, because they'd like to go to his church. So I did a little background checking. So my final argument, I said, ladies and gentlemen of the jury, I'm going to be very brief. It's a swearing match. And you heard what my client had to say, and you heard what the chief witness for the state had. You saw her get up here on the stand with that little bitty skirt on and cross them fat thighs like she was gonna get impressed. And she was doing that hoochie mama thing. You saw her, and it boils down to this. Who you gonna believe? A hoe or the son of a preacher man? Defense rest. They stayed out 35 minutes and walked him. See, you can do these things when you know human nature.
Psychology, you know?
Yeah, if you are on an appellate court and you don't know these things, you have no business being there because you don't know humanity. If you're a judge, you're supposed to be experienced and learned in the practice of law and its application and wise in the ways of the world. And these folk are not.
So just tell me this. I have a couple more. This has been I thank you for your time, right? But I have a couple more questions. But I just wanted to talk on, man, like, it's right what you say about judges, because it's the same thing with police. But like, people suffer, man. A lot of judges have these grudges, or as you said, it's kind of like they see certain people as triggering to what they experienced as their childhood. But like, the public suffers, bro, because people are getting longer sentences than they should be getting.
It's a long truth. See, there are people that have personal charisma. They walk into a room, people focus on them, even if they don't know who they are or what they're doing. They can make a presence felt. There are other people who lack personal power and authority, so they cloak themselves with roles that lend the authority of the role to them. All right? That's always been a problem. The next big problem, police and judiciary and prosecution, is this. We need to have the police and the parents and the teachers protect the children from the bullies. Oh my God, bullying. Well, part of growing up and becoming a man is learning how to deal with a bully. Even Hollywood used to know that, but they don't now. Look at Back to the Future. What is it? McFly goes back, his daddy's bullied by Biff in the present. He goes back, coaxes his daddy into busting Biff in the jaw. When he comes back, Biff is his flunky. All right? That's how you do it. They forget that they don't want that because that doesn't fit their narrative. So what happens is you get a cop out there whose business is about sometimes physically restraining, forcing, or controlling a situation. He's never been in a fight in his life. This is freaking him out. The guy he's dealing with has never been in a fight in his life. It's freaking him out. If you stand and watch, the body language is, I'm going to kick your ass, I'm going to kick your ass, you bet not, or so on and so on. And it's escalating because nobody recognizes what men used to learn growing up from first grade through 12th. There are certain things you do and don't do in interactions with each other, certain ways you can back it down. Partner, am I right in taking that as an insult? Well, no, sir, partner. No insult was intended. Just an observation and a question. Well, with that understanding, you see, now you don't have gunfight out in front of the saloon on Main Street. See, that's not black, that's not white, that's human nature. See, you get the apex predator on this planet that can kill and eat any damn thing it wants to. It kills each other real well, too. And when you get this predatory thing ramped up, stuff happens. So I'm watching, and this has actually happened in the last several months. I'm watching Cop and Citizen. I'm going, this is not going to end well. So I'll walk over, I'm Judge Joe Brown. Oh, Judge, you know, everybody knows me. Stop this shit. What's going on? Young man, you're asking him to kick your ass and you're challenging him to kick your ass. So is that what you really want here? I said, I'm reading your body language. Now, back off. And by the way, I'm running for mayor, so I'm going to be your boss, so don't give me any goddamn flack. I'll remember it, all right? Oh, yes, sir. You know, so they recognize the authority. And I didn't just sit on a bench. I walked through the hood. Hey, you come here. What you, oh shit, I messed up. Didn't I tell you you had a 10 o'clock curfew for the next month and a half? What the hell are you out at midnight? Judge, who you asked me, I didn't ask you. This is A and B conversation. You want to listen, you can listen. Don't interrupt me. Didn't I tell you I want to see you day after tomorrow at 10 o'clock? You understand? Yes, sir. And you see, that's authority. And they respect you because you're there. And then somebody might get the muzzle of 45 put in his face. It's A and B. You want to go there and you want to say that, you know, who do you think's going to get believed here, the judge or your dumb ass? Now back off. So 5 hours later, the sun's coming up and he's there hanging off every word with 10 or 12 other folk and you're schooling them on manhood. See, that's because you assert stuff. I'm in a place last month called Tate Street. Had more shootings on it than any other in Memphis. The adults decided to arm up because the police can't protect them. Police grew up in the neighborhood, but they're scared to go back there. So they armed up, the crime dropped. So they had a street fest. I'm there, I'm talking to folk, I even have it on video. And it's smooth. So somebody tells the sheriff Judge Joe Brown there, you better show up. So he shows up, squad car, uniform, gun on hip, deputies, uniform, gun on hip. Yeah, really? And he's scowling at all the armed adults. So 4 teenagers show up, 13 through 15. How do I know? Because I ask them later. They got Glocks stuck down the front of their pants. Totally illegal. Uniformed sheriff of the county, he say anything? No, he's looking the other way. I said, well, don't want to create an incident. I said, okay. So I go talk to him. You got it on tape, like you gotta go. This gotta stop. Okay, well, yeah, you know who I am? Blah, 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 blah. Come here. 2 grown adults. What the judge telling you? So you can't be here with this. There's peace on this street. Well, nah, So you go home. By the way, you work for me now. What? You work for me. Now you breaking my rules. I don't allow that. There'll be consequence. Now if you want to deal with being with your chief and getting where you live a better place, you can come on along, but you're going to catch hell if you don't, and you won't survive. Guarantee it. So do what your chief is telling you and you'll prosper in this world, one way or the other. That's right, he did me 25 years ago. You better listen to him. All right, now, I cleaned it up. No violence. Uniformed sheriff scared to hell. We had this Tyree Nichols mess in Memphis. White supremacy. Kamala Harris, Imhoff shows up. Al Chicken-Eating Sharpton shows up. Ben Crump shows up, trying to make a big deal of it. Okay, truth of the matter, it ain't racism. Why? Because almost 70% of Memphis is black. Only 19.1% of the registered voters are white. 65% of the police are black. 54% of them grew up in Memphis. The chief is a black female. The sheriff is a black male. The same stats are reflected in his department. 60% of the criminal court judges are black and female, and almost 70% of the jury pool is black. Now, what kind of racism do you have in that situation? You see, something else was going on. Tyree Nichols, they made hell of it all around the country. People were rioting behind this. Police gunned down somebody black. Didn't have a damn thing to do with police. 5 of the cops that got indicted, they're all frat brothers. What happened? Tyree Nichols, the dead man, his family's raising all this hell, but they weren't his family because they put him up for adoption. They divested themselves of all interest in him. He got adopted by a white couple on the West Coast, got cut out of all the action. They didn't get a chance to say anything. So anyway, they tell him to come back and get to his biological family. Now the allegations are, and some of the women allegedly have spoken on this, is that he took up with one woman out at FedEx where he had been working. She was the baby mama for one of the cops. She turned a friend girl on to him, so she was the wife of one of the cops. They tried to turn a third woman on to him who was married to one of the cops. She wouldn't go along with it, told her husband, who told his homeboys, told the guy to quit. He wouldn't. They looked for him, found him. They were going to jack him up. They weren't going to kill him, but he had Crohn's disease, and he died of intestinal bleeding. Now they got a murder case. He was 6'5", weighed 145 pounds. So we got a whole bunch of hype going off of something, allegedly, that has nothing to do with the subject at hand. It wasn't police action. This was some young men between 22 and 31 years old who didn't know how to handle this because they weren't used to dealing with the opposite sex and nobody was in control.
Please explain to the people watching why you say Orwell 1984 and Animal Farm accurately prophesize America's current economic, social, and political environment.
Well, if you want to see it, Google it. There's a 1952 CIA animation that pretty much word for word lays out the book. Some animals have a revolution and take over a farm, throw the humans off. So they set up a government. they have a constitution. The constitution says all animals are equal. Well, the pigs come in and decide to have a counter-revolution. They recruit the dogs, and the dogs are the enforcers, so they subject their will on everything else, everybody else. They modify the Constitution, so the thing is written on the side of a barn. It says all animals are equal. The pigs put a slash in that, but pigs are more equal than others. So they get rights that the other animals don't get, and that's what you see right now. You can't talk about certain people without it being a crime, but they can say anything they want to about you. You can't have free exchange of ideas because their position is weak when it comes to being opposed by more objective, rational, and logical reasoning. So what you do is you restrict what can be said. Now, that going into it, you have one thing. Let's take some of the situation with Trump. Forget whether you like him or not.
Hold on, Judge. Let me call the dude to pick you up, man. It's 1:38, bro.
Okay. Okay, so what happens is, forget it's Trump. Let's take, you have a right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used in evidence, etc., etc. That's called Miranda rights. Miranda was not a nice person, but we have our sacred Fifth Amendment rights under the label of his name. Now, a lot of what they're doing with Trump is just about as bad. And because you can assume Trump was a villain, then all of these rights are supposed to disappear. A lot of that goes to things we hold dear, like, for example, First Amendment. Everything they indicted for Trump for, from Bragg in New York for being the victim of a blackmail attempt, to a corporation that refused to violate a court's gag order about not revealing the substance of a settlement, to down there for January 6th, where everything in this little small criminal trespass moment that is being characterized as an attempt to overthrow the government, everything has been decided by the Supreme Court over the last 234 years as being okay. But you're disregarding the law because it's associated with Trump, just like in the name of political correctness, they disregarded the Fifth Amendment as it applied to Bill Cosby. Now here we take a senior citizen who's done a lot for the impacted communities of the country, and you cause him to spend all that time incarcerated, take away his liberty and freedom on something you know has no damn chance of passing constitutional muster. Well, it's the same thing here. You have a situation where you're talking about the classified papers. The U.S. Supreme Court in 1988, in a case called U.S. Department of the Navy versus Egan, E-G-A-N, in the various concurring opinions, said clearly, a president has the absolute right to declassify any document totally or partially in any fashion, in any shape, and by any method he chooses, for any reason he chooses to assign. He may classify a document for any reason. It has the same effect as his pardon power. Nobody can question him. He is, by Constitution, the commander-in-chief of the military. He can override the military. He is the chief diplomat. He has the last say on anything that impacts the country diplomatically. That's already been spoken to, and it's a slam dunk. Next thing, you have a situation with Biden and the documents in the box behind the vet. Well, the vice president has no such authority. Next thing, I actually got to look at the downloaded 3 laptops. There wasn't one, there were 3. We interviewed the technician, put him under oath for a moot proceeding in New Jersey this year, early this year. Biden is in there directing his son to inform the people to go look in the box behind the vet and they'll find what they want. 42 visits to Biden properties by Chinese representatives. What's going on? To get the U.S. Navy to back off of aggressive counter-patrolling in the South China Sea so the Chinese can put these concrete emplacements on top of these little bitty atolls that are not even above the surface so they can claim Chinese territory 200 miles around. 10 million apiece is supposed to be the payout. That's on a White House tape, audio and visual, not just audio. Obama's leaning on the front of his desk and he's going, let me make this clear. Let's see, Joe gets 10%, Hunter gets 10%, I get 10%. The Chinese representative, yeah, that's that $100 million cash we've deposited through this country. Each of you gets 10%, 10 million apiece. And they have an agreement. They discuss it. Now, how they let this clown get a hold of White House tapes, this crackhead, I don't know, but they sure as hell are discussing going by there to look at the papers in the box behind the vet. And they'll get what they need, and there are 41 visits that Secret Service won't disclose to that address. See, it's all kinds of stuff. So the Bill of Rights is designed to stop that. But here you have New York, Georgia, Florida, and what they're trying to do is snipe at this guy to keep him out of the political running, which is not what we're supposed to have. The people are supposed to make the choice, not some dipshits who are operating like they never went to law school.
What are the origins of Jewish power where no one can say anything about them without having their career destroyed?
In the Middle Ages, they made loans and they charged interest. Good Christians weren't supposed to charge interest because that's usury. They got into banking. They'd always been into banking because that's a Middle Eastern thing. It was set up in antiquity, the banking system that we now have internationally. So they got there up on the money aspect. You had people like Alexander Hamilton. He was raised as a Jew, born in Jamaica. And he was what he was, and there's always been influence, and there was always this thing in America about we have no official religion, and we cannot have religious test as the basis for anything that is done by our government. By the way, that's Article 6 of the Constitution. So we have an open playing field, and they also used us. That's what the NAACP was. Now, you'll hear various revisions on who founded the NAACP, but as the NAACP toots and have for the last 60-some years that I have been intimately aware of, the purpose of the NAACP was this. Jewish folk were catching hell in America. So if you used the Negro, colored people as a foil, if you couldn't do it to a Negro, you couldn't do it to a Jew. So the civil rights thing helped out the Jewish community immensely. And they have insinuated themselves greatly into the economic process of the country. Plus you have English presidents like Disraeli, one of the most powerful English prime minister. He was born a Jew, but he converted to Christianity. And since the thing is Christ was a Jew himself, and the whole basis of the hate is not so much racial as it is your religion, that blurs the distinction, because for the most part, you can't tell anybody Jewish from anybody who is Christian, from anybody who is Islamic, based just on their appearance. So it's wide open in America. And then as far as the black experience goes, I remember attending a lecture by Thurgood Marshall years ago, and he said what the NAACP and himself chose to do to advance civil rights for the first part of the 20th century, since there weren't any real laws other than the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendments on it, was this. They went to the Society for Prevention of Cruelty to Animals laws that states had passed. And the theory was, if you couldn't do it to a dog, you couldn't do it to a Negro. If you couldn't do it to a Negro, you couldn't do it to a Jew. So a whole lot of people have benefited from us being the Miranda, so to speak, about what rights are. Miranda's not a nice guy. People don't like Negroes, but they appreciate what we have set up. And over 50 years, it has been repeated over and over. You have to be fair and impartial. You can't be racist, even though somebody might be, but that's soaked into our national persona. So now some other groups take advantage of that, and they say, well, we're just like black folk. No, you're not. We have the same cause as black folks. No, you don't. But everything that's been said in association with black folk has been helpful to your cause. And Jewish people and Negroes and colored folk and black folk and Afro-Americans have been hooked up a long time in terms of what they're doing. Hollywood, that so many of us ideate on, is a Jewish enclave.
Well, that's what I'm trying to say. What is the origins of their power in Hollywood?
Because
the loans?
Because they chose to get involved. What do we ideate on?
As black people?
Yeah. What do you talk to typical black male youth? What does he want to be?
Sports, basketball,
yeah,
football
hey man, I want to play some
entertainer.
basketball. I offered some kid a full scholarship to get an airline pilot's license, multiple instrument flying qualified, multiple engine instrument flying qualified, six-figure income starting 22 years old with a major airline. He wanted to play basketball. He's 5'9" and he's 17. That's how we ideate. That's what deals with that thing, that your group ideates on certain things, you tend to gravitate there. What you want to be? Man, I'm into rapping, man. I want to be a rapper. I want to do rhymes, man. I want to play me some ball, man, make me some money. And if somebody else is talking about, I want to do this, that's what they get into. See, and the Jewish community is not homogenous. And there's another thing. See, there are atheist Jews who don't believe in the religion, but they have the culture. There are some similarities. Your Jewish status is determined by your mother's status. Your status as a slave or not is determined by your mother's status. Jews have had a rough time in the world, but if you ever read the Old Testament and what happens after they have the Exodus from Egypt, a lot of what's in the Old Testament looks like they're doing ethnic cleansing to impose monotheism on the people they passed getting from Egypt back to the Promised Land. Karma might be coming back around. See, all kinds of things happen. And not saying it's appropriate, but there's a big mismatch right now in the whole world behind that. And people look for scapegoats. And the Jews became the scapegoats for Europe for a long time. And black folk are the scapegoats for America. You see, in any time you have a large population, you have a lot of undisplaced interpersonal hostility and aggression. People are mad at each other. But if you've got a scapegoat they can displace all of that on, even if vicariously, then they tend not to be so angry. So America would be a fine place if it wasn't for them militant niggers that they have, like H-Rap something on others and Stokely whatchamacallits. Heard that a lot in the late 60s and early 70s. So it was a scapegoat thing. Love it or leave it, them long-haired, commie sympathizing hippies. See, that was scapegoats. This was an excuse for why it didn't work for you. You see, so right now we serve that vital function. You see, every time somebody looks at somebody being hip-hop or thuggish, people get to worrying about it. Even black folks see other black folk walking down the street and they want to walk on the other side if they look too gangster or too thug. White folk can be real thugs, real organized crime figures, and they don't get worried about it. Even the black folk feel comfy. And then, you know, it certainly doesn't help when you're going to take your mother or your mother-in-law or your girlfriend or somebody you trying to court to a restaurant, and somebody's yelling from one side of the park, like, hey, man, you knock it out last night, man. You did with Tommy Deacon, man. Was it good, man? Like, do you have to share? Really? Come on, tone it down.
Thoughts about the Malcolm X case. I know the family suing the FBI, the CIA, and the NYPD. Do you think they're going to get anything from this?
There's this thing called statute of limitations. Also, there's this thing called sovereign immunity. Good luck to them if they can get past it, and then they'll have to prove the case. And the problem is right now, I'd wager that 99% of the witnesses they need are dead.
How does that? That's why it don't work. Like, I know, like Fred Hampton, right? I know his family got something, and I think it's about 30 years after. But how does that work though? Because like, in regards to evidence, witnesses factor in people's mind and their perception of the event. People lying, not lying, then lying again.
Well, it's not lying. You see, I guarantee that if you went back over your life and you ran into people you went and were going to high school with, they might bring up an incident that you were there for or involved in. You don't remember it. But you see, it happened. Now that they triggered your memory on the thing, you might get some flashes of what happened. Or you might have a memory that doesn't match the reality, but you're not lying. It's just the fragility of human recall. See, like, we did a test in Shelby County, several of them, where we took detectives, Sheriff's Department and Memphis Police, and we tested them. I think the highest score out of these detectives who were supposed to be trained was just a 24% recollection and retention of factual events. I used to have a friend, a professor in the sociology department, and he had always staged this thing. He'd hook up with theater arts, and he would have actors in the class, and the gadget was a hard rubber comb, black. Somebody would pull it out, there would be a hassle, a tussle, and two people would run out, and one of them yelled, look out, he's got a knife, he's got a knife. Well, the professor would call the campus police over. Some of the campus police were in the theater arts thing, so they were actors. And they'd interview the students, and you'd get pearl handle switchblades, case hunting knives, and out of the 35 or 40 who saw it, one or two said, I didn't see a knife, I saw a comb, I think it was, or maybe it was a ruler, but I didn't see a knife. So you see, it's just human recollection and suggestivity. Now, another one that is important because it can be revealed by vigorous cross-examination is this. People are coming back into the office building, somebody's running a little late, they're coming down the hallway, somebody's laying at the foot of the stairs, there's a crowd around. What happened? Oh man, he and Tom, ran into each other up on the landing, and the dude fell down here, man, broke his leg. We called 911. He gets back to the office, man, it was cold. Tom pushed this guy down the stairs, man, broke his leg. He's just running off at the mouth, trying to be a gossip. Police come, what did you see? And he doesn't want to admit he lied, so he tries to save face. Now, when it gets to the point of do you solemnly swear that the evidence, or affirm that the evidence you give here today, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, he's got a position. He doesn't want to lie or break his affirmation, so what does he do? If he winds up telling the truth, he looks like a liar, or he looks like somebody who was an intentional thing, but then there is the legitimate lie. You got an eyewitness to an armed robbery at a liquor store. 3 people got shot. There's one crucial eyewitness. He saw everything, and he can identify everybody and describe with precision what they had on. Problem, he was dropping his side old lady off after screwing her at a motel. So he's going to lie and say, I was getting a pack of cigarettes when I was going by there. You know he was dropping his old lady off. That's a lie. He wasn't getting cigarettes. But it's not perjury, because it doesn't go to the material facts. And it's only perjury if it goes to a material fact of the case and it's not corrected before the matter is finished. So I was getting a pack of cigarettes. Prosecution, defense counsel, everybody knows he was lying. He was dropping his side lady off. But the crucial thing is what happened when 2 guys ran out shooting. Did one of them have on a red shirt, blue pants, and some Air Jordans? And can you ID them? Yeah, because one of them ran into the hood of his car.
I wanted to ask you, man, like you could have chose an easier route in regards to your life and just kind of join the crowd. Why did you decide to speak out and live the life that you have lived?
Go to your local zoo. Go to the primate cage. Take an hour or 2 and watch the chimps and the baboons. Some of these primates in there are alpha males. They are driven to do what they do. And what is it that they do? If they become the alpha male for the pack, or at the top of the hierarchy, they're the first to get eaten up by the leopard or the lion if it goes down wrong. So in other words, you have this compulsion to do what you do. So I just have that compulsion. I guess it runs in the family. Grandfather took Kojic to Kansas City in 1896. Other grandfather was a physician, murdered 2 deputies because they lynched a brother. An ancestor who was a district sub-chieftain for the Yoruba back in Africa and Nigeria. It just runs in there. You get this kind of thing too in some of the other stuff. Get a DNA test and you might be surprised at what's in you. It's interesting. A lot of us say, no, that's just because they got biological warfare on black folk. Just get the damn thing anyway and find out what you're talking about. Like, you know what amazes me? A lot of people, how come I got all this Chinese in me? Read the rest of it. Talking about they brought these Chinese coolies to the South to repair the wrecked Southern railroads in 1866. They didn't have any Chinese nookie. They got some ex-slave nookie. So a lot of you got Chinese in you. You're sitting up here bad-mouthing the Chinese. Guess what? One of them may be your great-grandfather or great-great-grandfather, or hell, if you're old enough, your grandfather. So check it out. You may be surprised.
And what was the lowest point of your life? Everyone has that period.
Well, most of the time when my low points in life came about, they were high points for something else. And when I look back on them, if they hadn't happened, I wouldn't be where I am now. So it's nowadays you accept things with equanimity, like a divorce or a death or something like that. It's like, okay, that's bad, but it's part of being human on a planet where your existence is threatened all the time by something that might take it. A low point could have been a high point could have been a low point. Right before I got elected the first time 35 years ago, I was leaning on a tree, broad daylight, July, not a cloud in the sky. I took 1/2 step, boom, the tree got hit by lightning. Bam, burst into flames. I didn't get hit by splinters. People 15, 20, 30, 50 yards away got hit by the splinters. That could have been a very low point, but it wasn't. I had this James Earl Ray thing in my courtroom, and I'd got home late at night, tired, fell asleep at the kitchen table, woke up 3-something in the morning, 2 dark shadows out front, 3 in back. Some folk broke in trying to kill me, 30 shots plus exchanged. My friend, who was the director, a guy named Winfrey, and another detective who was a client, came over. Heavy blood trail front and back, half of somebody's earlobe on the window sill. Found out the dispatcher's records recordation had been turned off 30 minutes before. 45 minutes after, no reports on anybody seeking treatment. All kinds of blood out in the yard.
So this was, hold on, this was in Memphis?
Yeah, in Memphis. Yeah, and his van didn't want it to, but the bottom line is that could have been a disaster. But it was a high point. I felt excited.
So
I was
hold on,
exhilarated,
hold on.
you know.
During the case now,
It's
judges,
dangerous sometimes.
you don't get a certain level of protection?
I didn't want protection. What do I need some young men to protect me for?
So
I'm supposed to be protecting them.
So
Plus,
you just
that
carry
was,
carry the strap all the time?
Yeah, I always pack, except
Yeah.
someplace like this, which is back ass, but you know, I have to fall back on martial arts. But the bottom line is that I found the whole experience very exhilarating and exciting.
Hold on, I just want to know this story, man. You're doing the case, right? People come to your house, they try to shoot you up. Did you go back to court the next day?
Yeah.
But so how was your perception? First of all, did you find out who did it?
They never found out. Probably I killed them. And they buried him someplace. They had on dark clothing, black balaclavas, you know, the ski mask thing. Yeah. Radios over here, you know, sidearms on the hip, fancy industrial glass cutters to get in, all kind of stuff.
So you think this was a police thing or a government thing?
Government. Then there's the other thing. Not long before that, there had been an incident. Judge, you better take this call. We'll take a brief. Who's this? Detective. Okay, yeah, what's up? There are two guys trying to break into your Lexus out in the parking lot. We got it covered. 15 minutes later, Judge, they were trying to plant 2 kilos of coke in your car. Okay, we got them on the ground. They claim it to be government. It's some kind of sting operation. Like hell, you got a judicial plate on your car and your name's on the parking space. Yeah, see, they do that. I knew somebody that used to run adult probation and parole for the feds before Biden got that canceled back in '81. And they tried to put 2 kilos of coke in her car one time to discredit her, but fortunately somebody caught that too. See, you have friends on both sides. I've had situations where you're driving down the street, some detectives, you know, have your cell phone, Judge, you got 2 cars following you. When you get down here to Union Avenue, make a left against the no left turn sign, pull into that Exxon station. We got it covered. All right. You're going down Cooper. Boom, make the illegal left, pull in there. They pull in on the other side. 2 detective plainclothes cars swoop and block them in. What it was, they claim they're with some kind of alphabet agency. They're claiming immunity from doing it. Does the government get involved? Hell yes. I had another case. It was a murder trial in my courtroom. Get this one. These guys struck a diamond vein in a national park in Arkansas. They had all of their mining permits. It was 7 of them. They were going to mine them. They got visited in 1990 by Oppenheimer De Beers from South Africa. They got offered something they shouldn't have refused. They refused anyway because it was too low. They sent 4 hitmen over from South Africa. They killed 4 of these guys outright. They shot the 5th one, made him a paraplegic. We're getting ready to shoot him in the head when some Memphis police busted in the door. They'd been next door for a domestic violence call. 4 of them dropped the gun. We start into the trial. We get 3 weeks into it. We're talking about how diamonds are so plentiful that the only reason they cost so much is because De Beers has this monopoly, that tribalism isn't really tribalism. It's De Beers propping up their diamond monopoly. Nobody's contesting that, yeah, we shot all these people. We break for the weekend. Lock up jury. Monday, no trial because no defendants. U.S. Department of State's come in, granted them diplomatic immunity, and flown them back to South Africa.
How many of those situations do you have or have you witnessed where higher powers killed a case?
Several. They do it. Like James Earl Ray didn't shoot King. The FBI solicited the shooters, provided the murder weapon and the ammunition, which is very unique, recruited the shooters from probably Quantico Marine Sniper School, which is right next to the FBI Academy up there. They shot King from the firehouse, two-man team, not the flop house or the bushes. The Memphis Police Department's Homicide Bureau was adamant that Ray was not the gunman. Some reason the prosecutors, which have a long history of being crooked in the area, insisted he was. Anyway, he never confessed, and interestingly enough, I got approached some years afterwards so they could get the information from somebody that set up an algorithm for a computer program. And what the program does is from stage 0 to 34, from bright red to dark green, bright green, it has a scale where it's not a lie detector test. It analyzes people's tones of voice, language, and an animation of their body language to arrive at what they're saying. The theory is that when we talk, only 15% of what we're saying has to do with the words. 35% consist of the tone and 50% the body language. So they were analyzing what bin Laden actually meant, what Putin was meaning, still means. And there was a group of military officers that were concerned about their oath to uphold the Constitution and what was happening in Guantanamo. So they became concerned. So what they did was they wanted to test this machine out by getting a tape of what they assumed was an outright liar, James Earl Ray. So they got 6 hours of tape from his last interview, and they were astonished where he came all the way across bright green on everything except 2 occasions, which was completely neutral. And the questions were a version of, if you didn't do it, do you have any idea who did? And he said, I'm not sure. And those were the only 2 out of 6 hours worth of questions on that tape that he did not come across being truthful. So they asked the person that invented the algorithm, a woman, to come talk to me. There's another thing, too, interestingly, about King, and I'm sure they'll deny it, but 24 years ago, the Vatican wanted to make King a posthumous Catholic so they could make him a saint. So they got interested in what happened, so they were putting something into what went on, so they approached me about getting the information. It's an interesting thing.
Why do lawyers cost so much?
They shouldn't. We have entirely too many of them are not good lawyers. They're businessmen, but not professionals. And they have too few clients to keep the doors open charging a reasonable fee, so they charge very high fees. And I'll give you a little secret. The best criminal lawyers do not charge the highest fees because, A, they're doing it as a matter of principle because they're citizens too. And when they protect your rights, they're protecting their own. And 2, they want your families to show gratitude by bringing in the accident cases and the personal injury stuff, so they'll make the big money that way. 2 further things. This is personal. I am running for mayor of Memphis to straighten this mess out, probably the most corrupt and dangerous place in America, and it should be one of the best. So if you want to find out what I'm doing that way, go to jjb2023.com. You can even make it a rhyme. You know, we got a chant. JJB in 2023. JJB, etc., etc.
I had a question.
And then one other thing, too, part of that is send Brown downtown, take back your town. I know where the skeletons are in the closets and all the damn graveyards where they're buried in. So I'm going to straighten it out. I have some plans about reforming the police, bringing industry, heavy economy there, using the river for electric power, all kinds of things that we need and could have if somebody with some sense and vision were there to actually lead. Next thing, that's service. The other thing is sauce. I have barbecue products that are very good. JJBBBQ.com, Judge Joe Brown Barbecue.com. And I am business partners with Tiffany Haddish, and we have doing our smoked and raw, hot and mild chicken links. We have the only black female run meat packing plant, USDA certified in California. And we also do a joint thing with some sisters, or a sister. Her name is Michelle Dukes. It's called Poppy's, P-A-P-I''S. It is some of the smoothest bourbon you have ever had. She named it after her grandfather, who was a moonshiner down in Mississippi, and came up with the recipe. It is some good stuff. So we have been selling that. We are in the markets and on the shelves on the West Coast. We're spreading to the Southeast shortly. We just attended a grocery wholesalers thing where we got rave reviews over the stuff. It's really good, and you can order it online, jjbbbq.com. It's great stuff like nothing you've ever tasted. I've been working on the recipe for 45 years, and we enlisted Beyonce's personal chef, Chef Damon, to make it healthy. Mine was old time way, but now we can get into Whole Foods and Sprouts and all of that stuff. And if you're in Los Angeles, you can pick it up on 79th and Western down in the hood at D's Original Takeout Grill. So that's jjbbbq.com. Look for it. It's good stuff.
Since you brought it up, I just want to ask, please break down the process of using the Mississippi River to power the city, and why hasn't it been done already? I thought that would be like a natural.
Oh, people see, most of your elected officials now are just lightweight hustlers. They're punked out. They can't walk through the streets. They don't know anything. They look like they're auditioning for a part in an Atlanta Housewives cotillion. And they don't have any thoughts. They're just trying to steal crumbs under the table. Now, the Mississippi River runs 24/7. They have these things that they use in places in Asia and Africa. They put them in tidal flows where they just go in and out a few hours a day. Spend a lot of money on storage facilities. But these things look like size large outboard motors, and they hinge to go up and down for service. And instead of having a prop like that, they've got a big one, and they spin in the currents. Shaft goes up to the dynamo that generates the electricity, and you can wire them into a system. All you need is rafts, and like in Memphis, we have all of these small boat arenas. They would be no more invasive in terms of environmental impact than those are, and the Corps of Engineers shouldn't have any problem with them. So you can put one or two in the back of a large pickup, and we can install thousands of them and generate enough power to run the city, bring in heavy industry that would have essentially free power. The local transit authority says they could drop the fare down to a nickel a ride, and most of that would be for maintenance, and expand 5 times as many buses running electric, since they wouldn't have to worry about fuel cost. We could drop the utility bills down to nothing, and we could sell the surplus from New Orleans to Louisville to Chicago to Little Rock to Atlanta, St. Louis, Kansas City, and all points in between, and develop a national industry where you don't have to build dams to get hydroelectric power. You can put these things down in a river, and we've got plenty of big rivers in America. We could really change the paradigm, and you wouldn't put people in the petroleum industry out of work because you could use the stuff to build with rather than burn. So we have some solutions that we have to use wind farms, which we have high winds in the area. You can utilize solar electric farms, require that they be on top of every government building, schools, and everything else, and we can use that. I want to do some things for youth employment to engage the unions in setting up apprenticeships for the youth so they become dues-paying members eventually. Cadillac and Ford are building electric plants there, and they're going to build all of their electric-powered Fords there. And remember, California won't let anything be sold but electric vehicles after 2032. Cadillac's going to do that. Ford has already said they want to hire 28,000 people, 27,500 specifically, within the next 3 years, and that's going to require an expansion with the 75,000 or so family members of people that would be brought in to a town just outside Memphis of maybe 250,000 people within 10 years, which is going to be an enormous possibility in terms of building industries. And I want to turn that into something where organized labor gets into it so they can rationalize people's wages so they don't get exploited like they are in Memphis now, to give the youth something to work into, to set up some sanctuaries and put them in programs so that they get STEM training, also vocational skills training, and we could have the first or second largest city in America by the time the end of the century rolls around. This could be the new Detroit. It would be a sanctuary, not sanctuary city, but sanctuary for intelligent, hard-working Americans. I'm not having this bullshit thing you get in New York. If you aren't legal, stay the hell out. And our sheriff right now is not enforcing the law and not cooperating with ICE, and we're getting a problem in Memphis. That's wrong. And by the way, he's running for mayor. He can't even speak 10 words without stumbling. But it is what it is because certain people are propping him up. And it's not necessarily law enforcement. But it's a place that could be everything America wants. It's the distribution capital of North America. And Europe wants to ship stuff that they put on board barges and load up on transports to get across the Atlantic to New Orleans, float up the Mississippi to Memphis, to the world's largest barge unloading facility, and get right in at America's distribution point. And also, there is a distinct opportunity to take all of those electric cars, bring them back out, put them on the barges, get them over to the Mediterranean, to Europe, go straight through the Suez Canal and get them directly into Asia, load up some Toyotas, Mitsubishis, Nissans, Infinitis in Asia, bring them back through the Suez Canal, get them to Memphis, to the distribution point where they have to get through once they land in California, which is a trip that's 9,000 miles longer than the one I'm talking about. So we have a lot going that we aren't exploiting, and people want to spend $3.5 billion on a new football field, almost $1 billion on converting a football arena into a soccer stadium, to spend $250 million on financing a major international hotel chain to renovate a downtown hotel, while you restrict parking downtown only to people who live there or who have businesses there. Everybody else is supposed to exercise a certain somebody's parking facilities and take their transportation to 6 miles from where they are to downtown. They got a big fight over whether they're going to allow parking near the court facilities and the police headquarters and sheriff's headquarters. I mean, all kinds of little confounded mess. See, we are in a very corrupt city where a lot of money goes under the table, and they're novel means of bribing people.
Why do American cities allow them to just like go in the dumps? We have Kensington here in Philadelphia. You have areas in LA. You have areas in Seattle where it's like, it's almost like it's anarchy, but like they just let it be. There's no
leadership vacuum. See, if your leadership are punk asses who can't get out in the streets, who's leading the streets? The streets try to fill up the power vacuum and they don't know how. Strong cities like New York, Chicago, LA, places like that, you used to have organizations, and the kids would get involved in the organizations to move up and they'd learn how to do it. Now there's no organization, no leadership. Your leader is at a desk trying to administer something he or she does not know how to deal with, and there's nobody eyeballing the kids, the youth, or the citizens that could give direction, sense of purpose, or cause to, so it all goes to hell. Also, too much is being spent in the wrong kinds of corruption. In other words, it used to be corruption, but it supposedly had some fallout to ordinary people. Now it doesn't. And they have these special agendas that they push. So you've got rainbow sidewalks and crosswalks, but no red, black, and green. You don't have any programs. Take your son to work week. There are no role models of fatherhood in the hood, and the boys are taught, to let it all go. It's not your responsibility, whereas it actually is. So there is poison that has developed. The cities are filthy. This place, compared to the last time I toured it, which has been about 35 years ago, is filthy. I've never seen so many homeless people and zombies. They're high off of something. They're standing up in the middle of a traffic lane. The traffic's going around. They're tilted over, eyes closed, about to fall over, but they never do because they're high. The grass isn't cut. Trash isn't picked up. What's going on? These are jobs for people to cut the grass, to pick the trash up. Why don't somebody get the idea we can pay people for this? You have all these folk that you're talking about. We need to let the brothers righteously locked up. They shouldn't be locked up. Well, community service may be an alternative. Why don't we have people doing community service, picking up this mess? Why is it America's water has been allowed to get so badly polluted when you have the utility companies who have criminally allowed their infrastructure to deteriorate because what ought to be sunk back into that is used for something else? See, we live in a system where, like it or not, you get the representation you deserve. And if we deserve this mess, it's because we won't break out of it. We have gotten into causes where we become loyal to parties. And in American political history, the thing is, if you are completely loyal to a party, that party loses absolutely nothing if they do nothing for you. The other party, if they try to do something for you, gets absolutely nothing in return, so neither party has an incentive to do anything to help you out. And politics is about, what do I get for my vote? Generally, it's excellence in government, but right now, we look at it at what kind of agenda am I pushing, and then how many people are actually behind that agenda. Look at Anheuser-Busch. They did that Bud Light thing behind that strange boy in blue panties and bra that masquerades as a girl, and they lost 1/3 of their business, and they've had to lay off hundreds of people. So that's supposed to be nothing? Well, it's a real world vote plebiscite where millions of people voted by not spending. So it's not like you've got a national poll where 1,400 people vote and there's plus or minus 5% in the accuracy of the outcome. You've got tens of millions of people said, this used to be the supplier of 64% of America's beer market, and there are at least 100 million folk who drink beer sometimes in this country, and they've lost 1/3 of their market, and it's still dropping. Somebody doesn't like it. So we need to keep these things in mind. Now, I understand it's these folks' absolute right to do what they do. It doesn't make it good, but they have a right to do it if they want to be selfish about it. You see, in our country, we have collateral damage. It's like driving a car on a freeway. To get somewhere fast, you risk getting killed in an automobile accident or maimed, but we don't want to give up the benefits, so we suffer the collateral damage. The type of system we have, we don't want to really give up the benefits because we wouldn't like that, but there's collateral damage. And some people, to cut out the collateral damage, want to destroy the system. Doesn't work that way. So with that said, hi, bye, and gotta go. This has been Judge Joe. Get me when you can, since I'm the one that ran.